Hello everybody and welcome back to Terra, where today I am joined once again by Quipster. Quipster, how you doing, man?
I'm good. It's good to be back.
Great. Well, today we are going to talk about that one of the most beloved series in all of Warhammer 40k. We're going to talk about the Night Lords trilogy and in particular Talos Valkorin. And this series has a hold on the fandom unlike pretty much any other series, I think. And it completely changes people's view of the Traitors when they read it. It completely gives people a new love, I think, of the setting. Why do you think that is, Bud? Why do you think so many people read the Night Lords trilogy and then come out and are obsessed with Blue and Lightning and Prophecy and all that good stuff?
You know, after thinking about it, I think I know exactly why. And it's because before these books came out, there was actually not that much written about the Night Lords. We didn't know that much about their backstory other than the bare basics, the essentials. So Conrad Curze, complete lunatic, Nostromo, mafia planet, full of resources. The Night Haunter was essentially like Batman who kills and eats people. All the sort of bare bones of the story. But what these books did was they essentially made the Night Lords not just the perfect bad guys, but the perfect anti-heroes. A really good example, I think, is if you compare, this to the Marvel universe. You've got Killmonger, for example. Killmonger is the bad guy of the Black Panther storyline, but you understand his motivations, you see his struggle, you see where he's come from, literally, you see his entire backstory and you sympathize with him and you go, oh, actually, if I was in the same position, maybe I would do something similar. And what the Night Lords Omnibus does is it puts you in that position for the Night Lords. You see their backstories, you see their relationships, you see their systems of morality, and they do kind of still have those. And you empathize with them and you think to yourself like, oh, actually, they're not just murderous psychopaths, because there's this tendency, especially with chaos factions, to be like, they're just lunatics. They're completely crazy, doing whatever they want, killing everyone. But that's actually not.
Which he also thinks, by the way.
True.
Just say that.
But that's the thing. It goes back to, Talos especially having this moral code that he sticks to, and you sort of being able to empathize with that. I think that's what people really latch onto. They latch onto the sort of core storyline and narrative of, I think this is going to be full of spoilers. I think the thing that encapsulates all of this storyline is, Talos is asked, what did you want to be essentially as a space marine, and he says, I wanted to be a hero. And he's just not that, but you can tell he means it. And so you're just like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I empathize with these characters as a result of understanding them as people.
I get it. Yeah, I know. I get where you're coming from. I think that, yes, a couple of things you said there really interesting, really resonate with me. Firstly, yes, the depth of the character. There is so much more depth to Talos as a character than most Chaos characters. But also, you're really right, I think. And not to put it down, but I do think you are right in the ADB kind of went first with a lot of stuff. And so now everything is just going to be compared to Talos. So I'll do a quick run through of this story in a second for people in chat who are very unfamiliar. But just as a brief, like at the time this was written, there hadn't been too much on the forces of chaos really since the Horus Heresy had been written. So like the Lords of the Night, which is a Night Lords book that does precede this, that is the story of Sahal and the Nox Corona. And in that story, that's like one of them, maybe even the first story we get once the Primarch idea is settled within the mind of Games Workshop. And so, like, this story that picks up, and it immediately picks up kind of post the death of Conrad Curze. We should say, as a precursor, that if you read Conrad Curze, the Night Lords book, the Conrad Curze's Primarch story, then that leads directly into the series, and Talos does appear at the end of the story. But yes, you are right. Like ATB sort of went first with a lot of this stuff, and it was very cool to read for the first time. So we have we have a space marine properly breaking away from sort of like the wishes of his primarch, or in theory the wishes of his primarch, where all of his brothers are sort of like wanting to take power and fight over the remnants of Conrad Curze and his relics. And then you have the fact that he's kind of forges his own destiny. You have him kind of pushing away the idea that like all these other Night Lords that are falling to chaos, and his own captain, his Chaos Lord is messing around with demons, and like it's just a shadow of what his former self. And then he rejects Abaddon, and he rejects Huron Blackheart, and he's such a fucking menace that even the Craft World Ulthwé, and Craft World Ulthwé are, it talks about going first, they are like the big Xenos race pretty much in like an OG Warhammer. They are the big Xenos race, and they're like, this guy cannot live. He is that terrifying as a person. He has to die. I mean, like, what a fucking character. I mean, like, how are you going to write anything that comes close to this? Anyway, sorry, yes, anything else to add, mate, or should I go straight into summarizing the story there?
Straight in. There's a few things we can add later down the line.
All right. Okay, yeah, so as I say, going to do a quick summary of Talos' story, just for people who are very unfamiliar with it, but definitely goes without saying in this stream more than ever that definitely recommend reading it for yourself. So, Talos, originally an apothecary of the Night Lord's Legion, what truly set him apart was his genetic inheritance. Not just like Conrad Curze, because of his gene seed, Talos suffered from a devastating visions of the future, meaning he was forced to see as a god saw, as he puts it, to know what a god knew. However, when he has these visions, he suffers pretty horrendous seizures, and the returning visions would peel back any lesser torment, bathing his mind once more in fire. Talos earned his nickname directly from the Night Haunter himself. Before Curze allowed himself to be assassinated, he told Talos, "Because the name suits you, one soul, my son, one hunt. In the name of revenge, you will hunt one shining soul when all others turn their backs on vengeance." And that's exactly what happened. After the Imperial Kaladas assassin Shen killed Curze, the rest of the Legion fell into bickering greed over their father's relics, but not Talos. Talos hunted her down through the void, cornered her, and held her, and I love this quote, with the gentleness of a lover. He whispered to her, "I never believed I would disobey him until you came into our home and took him from us," right before, of course, he gunned his chainsword into life and slaughtered her. So then we jump ahead 10,000 years in the story, and when we get to the 41st millennium, the Night Lords are now this scavenging, fractured mess. Talos is disgusted by what his brothers have become, especially his commander Vandred, who is now possessed by a demon and known as the Exalted. Talos is a purist who refuses to bow to the ruinous powers, telling the Exalted, "I stopped respecting you when you changed into this." He even wears a mishmash of salvaged armor. He has an Imperial eagle that still shines on his chest and wields a stolen, golden, priceless Blood Angels power sword named Aurum, which quite hilariously, the Blood Angels of course want back, so he can use it to bait them pretty much at any time. When Abaddon tries to recruit him into the Black Legion, Talos flat out rejects the War Master of Chaos. He stares Abaddon down and states, "I kneel only before my Primarch, War Master. Since his death, I kneel before no one." He even mocks Abaddon's failing crusades, accusing the Black Legion of weakness because they leech strength from other sources, because your own legion's might is almost gone. His warband is now this fractured mess, and his demon-possessed captain is just leading them into ruin. However, the Night Lords eventually end up making a desperate deal with Lucht Huron, the Blood Reaver. But when Talos spots an ancient Night Lord's cruiser in the Red Corsair's Armada, the Echo of Damnation, he declares to his commander, "That's our ship, and we are not leaving until we get it back." Ultimately, Vandred manages to suppress the demon inside of himself just long enough to cover their escape. He rams the Night Lord's old dying ship into the Corsair fleet, saying a final, "I hope this hurts," before detonating the core. But this is where fate finally starts to catch up with the Soul Hunter, because he has drawn the ire and the wrath of Craftworld Ulthwé, who have seen that one day he will become so powerful he will be the end of their Craftworld. So they of course try to preempt that future. Talos eventually leads his warband back to the ruins of their old fortress on Segualsa, seeking a meaningful end to his struggles. I am tired of merely serving this war, he says. I want to win it. He tells his brothers, however, the Eldar of Craftworld Ulthwé have foreseen Talos will unite the 8th Legion, and they come to destroy him. So to prevent this, they send a strike force, including the deadly Phoenix Lord, Jane Zar, one of the most powerful fighters in all of Warhammer 40k. They intend to wipe out Talos and the First Claw. An Eldar Banshee promises Talos, you will cross blades with the Voidstalker, and you will die on this world. One by one, the First Claw is ripped apart in the dark catacombs of Segualsa. In the final tragic climax, Talos faces Jane Zar in the pouring rain. She is far too fast for him, and the black spear cleaved through him, finishing the work his own sword had started in her hands. But Talos refused to die quietly. As the sword dropped from his grip, Talos opened his other hand. The grenade in his fist activated the moment his fingers slipped from the thumb plate, detonating the explosives and the power generator on his back, blowing both of them to oblivion. But this isn't the end of Talos' story. Although Jane Zar would be killed by an allied dreadnought, unfortunately, unfortunately, this victory wouldn't last, because as a Phoenix Lord, she will just be reborn in another's body. But fortunately, this isn't the end of Talos' story, not really, because before his final battle, Talos made a pact with the apothecary Varial, who was a defector from the Red Corsairs, and he told Varial, whether I live or die this night, you are welcome to my gene seed come the dawn. So Varial harvests the uncorrupted gene seed of the Soul Hunter and implants it in an unnamed child of Talos, which is basically implied to be the child of two of Talos' slaves, his beloved Septimus and Octavia. So a child that grows with his gene seed implanted within its body will have all the makings of such a powerful warrior, just like Talos had. And so we see this child do grow up in the epilogue a little bit, where his new name is Septimus, and once again he kind of wields this breastplate that holds the image of an Aquila, its spread wings richly broken by hammer blows. He carries Malkarion's bolter and the Blood Angel's blade Aurum, and introduces himself with words that change the fate of the galaxy. My name is Decimus, the prophet of the 8th Legion. And so it was that Warhammer 40k fans did very little but spam Games Workshop's comment sections with questions of when is Decimus finally returning, because of course that's what we all want. So, as I say, very brief summary. There's also some short stories that go along with Talos that are very good. It's just one of the most beloved characters in all of Warhammer 40k. So, Quibster, where did you want to start? Like, what in your mind? When people talk about Talos being such a good character, what do you think of?
So, I think one of the things that is very underrated about the story and really elevates Talos as a character is everyone around him, and very especially the human characters that he interacts with. This is a problem, I think, that can happen with especially the Heresy novels. You get this, at times, singular focus on the Space Marines. And if you do that, all Space Marine power is kind of put all on the same level, unless you have something to compare it to. So, and all Space Marine relationships can seem quite one note, unless they're juxtaposed with humans. Really good example of this is the love story between Septimus and what's her name? The Navigator. Octavia. Yes, exactly. Because Space Marines don't feel love. They feel brotherhood, they feel comradeship, but they don't feel love. And so it's almost like when when Talos, sees that relationship, we get this juxtaposition of, actually, the Space Marine perspective is quite alien to the human perspective, because he kind of doesn't really get them being in love. When he confronts Septimus and he says, how could you have done this? He does not understand the emotional connection and bond that those two have. And and more than that, the times that he rescued Octavia from the Black Legion.
Hmm.
It was the Black Legion in the first book, wasn't it?
It's I think it's just prisoners.
Just
Yeah, it's just yeah, criminal gang. Yeah, but he does go and rescue it. You're right. Yeah.
exactly. So he has care for those under his command, even if you know there is a point at which further in the story he literally plays with a couple of people he intends to kill. By juxtaposing, human characters around him and the way they react to him, I think is really important and something that people don't really like bring up enough.
Yes, totally get where you're coming from. Yes, you are. Yes, you're very. Yeah, you're right to bring it up. His treatment of his serfs is one of those things I think people really latch onto with the Night Lord series because they are objectively chapter serfs. It's not a particularly great life in terms of how a lot of people see it. And yet, we see why being a serf of Talos is actually one of the better faiths you can get in 40k, especially on the side of the traitors. Like Talos kind of points out in the book that like it's to his brother Usus, where he's talking to Usus about the fact that Usus is like a classic nightmarish night lord, where he's just torturing and murdering serfs at will. And Talos points out that this is not a very good strategy for the long-term success of the Legion, because obviously you're going to basically run out of people who are very important to you. Septimus is a very valuable pilot, so that's why it's so important. He's so good, so useful. And Octavia is, as a navigator, wields tremendous power. And again, like in terms of things going first, this is, I think, one of the first times we get to see a great description of using like the navigator third eye, where Talos has her uncover it and she wipes out an entire like astropath choir, causing like the psychic backlash from this causes like so many worlds to fall into chaos. And that's what I think ultimately ends up attracting the ire of Craftworld Ulthway. So like it's such a big deal, the fact that he kind of utilizes his human serfs to such an incredible degree. And there's he finds when he finds this 10-year-old girl, he gives her his sigil, and that sigil means that like no one can touch her because she's under the protection of the soul hunter. And so if anybody hurts any of his serfs, he will hunt them and he will kill them. And yeah, we do see that with Octavia, where when she's kidnapped, he goes on a brutal tirade and just tears apart her kidnappers. So yes, fantastic. Right.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the other thing I was going to say as well, sort of talking about that, is that there are very few examples in the novels where we see the society that is built around chaos ships or chaos planets or chaos control planets. In the Night Lords Omnibus, it goes into details about how the chapter serfs, although really serfs is a really just fancy way of saying slaves. um, they're all just slaves.
Yes.
But the slaves have their own community. They have a market, and that's just something we just don't think about because it's very easy to just have this idea in our minds that it's chaos, survival of the fittest. But no, that's not how it would be. You would need hierarchies and systems of organization. And in this case, it's organized in terms of protection and rackets, exactly like the mafia would. And that's sort of a reflection of their Nostroman culture. But those systems of protection to ensure that they have like a safe, quote unquote, functioning ship for themselves is fascinating. And I think that's another reason that we bind on and we latch onto the Night Lord story, because there's very few places where that kind of thing's ever explored. Like imagine there's very few examples of, say, for example, a World Eater ship. We never really get to see the society inside a World Eater ship. Like, how does that work? Like, are they just lost to the nails the whole time? Evidently not. They can't be. And so, yeah, there are few examples where we get to see that in a 40k context.
Yes, for sure. And Conversely, on the other side of this, we see the rest of the Night Lords kind of falling into just areas of depravity that most of us can't really fathom. You know, like even when they're just kind of messing with their serfs, of course they are terrified because these are flayers. These are just absolutely brutal monsters. So yes, it serves as a nice counter to that. I also think moving on, like we spoke about a bit earlier, we get this great scene, and I think it has defined a lot of people's opinion of Abaddon, which really shows you how impactful this series is, where Talos does outright reject the Black Legion. And he does, you know, he's kind of disgusted by what Abaddon has become. And sometimes I wonder whether ADB wrote the Black Legion series to correct this sort of misapprehension, because, like, you know, some people lean very heavily on the unreliable narrator thing, and I try not to, but I do like to remember that, like, this is a point of view. Talos, you know, he wants to win the Great Game. He definitely does. Sorry, the Long War, not the Great Game so much, but the Long War. But the problem is that he is severely limited in his power to do that. But ultimately, it does appear that he might have been right, because Craft World all the way recognized, and they have, you know, they're able to read the skeins of fate. They're able to basically see into the future to some degree, and they could see Talos and the First Claw ripping apart their Craft World, one of the most powerful factions in the setting. So what do you make of that, man? Do you really think Talos could have been the big bat in 40k? Do you think it is it could have happened?
I think anything is possible. Because if you look at the origins of a lot of, you know, the big bad characters in 40k, you've got, you know, Huron Blackheart, a random chapter master, essentially.
Yeah.
Abaddon, a captain in one of the legions. Yeah. Like, these people come from...
Abaddon, to be fair. Abaddon's like a literal prince.
Okay, fair. To be fair. Yeah, I think a lot of these characters can start with fairly humble beginnings. Abaddon, to be fair, is a bad example. But
yes, I get what you're
plus Huron, I think. They do have these very humble beginnings. And I really like that. I do think the idea that, you know, everyone has to have, you know, this lineage is a little bit overdone. But then again, you've got my argument falls apart entirely, because essentially Talos is the chosen of the Night Haunter, because he says, like, you are the Soul Hunter, like, you're one of my favorites, like, you're going to do this thing. So my entire argument falls apart, because he is essentially the literal chosen one of the Night Lords. So
yes, well, in fact, let's talk about that just for a second, because yes, you hit upon an important point that I think ADB left in there for us to kind of debate and think about, which is that on the one hand, it is true to say that Conrad Curze wanted his sons to just kind of leave him to die, and he wanted to just point out, I think in the Night Lords, he just calls, like, the hypocrisy of the Imperium. You know, deeper than that, I suspect, but, you know, the hypocrisy of the Imperium, which is why he's allowed himself to be killed by this assassin. And yet, at the same time, he called Talos the Soul Hunter, specifically because he knew he would hunt one soul, the soul who killed him. So it sort of undercuts Conrad Curze, doesn't it? Like, Talos's existence does, because why did, if Conrad Curze really wanted to just be the to prove that hypocrisy and leave it, why didn't he just not call Talos the Soul Hunter, make sure, you know, he may perhaps even kill Talos, make sure Talos would not hunt his killer, and just allow M. Shen to then disappear, and it be the ultimate proof of the Imperium's hypocrisy. It's not the greatest thing ever, but to me it's a wonderful little with Conrad Curze. It's a lovely little tidbit that he kind of left in there. So I find it just a really interesting character. And yes, you are right. It suggests that he has a much kind of bigger role, and there's always going to be this kind of debate, which is like, who is Conrad Curze's real chosen son? Because Conrad Curze, is just well established, kind of hates all of his sons. And what makes Talos quite interesting is that Talos comes from Nostramo at the time when it's fallen back into complete fucking nonsense because Conrad Curze has left and it's just a horrific place to live. Talos comes from that time. So Conrad Curze hates literally all of his sons except Talos that come from this time on Nostramo, and he hates most of the rest. But there's like Sevatar that he does kind of like. And the question is, you know, who is the real chosen, Sevatar or Talos? And Sevatar, of course, is notably absent from the Night Lord series. Big question everyone has, like, where Sevatar has not been seen since his escape during the heresy, and we just don't know what happened to him. But yeah, I mean, how do you rank the Talos versus Sevatar matchup? Do you have a favorite?
I mean, if it's going to be in one-on-one combat, Sevatar's going to win every time. But in terms of importance to the story, it's a very difficult comparison because we know exactly what happened to Talos. We know his beginning, middle, and end of his story. Whereas Sevatar, it's
sorry, just to clarify, we don't know after he disappears what happens to him.
Yes.
Sorry,
exactly.
just for chat to be like, what?
After Sevatar disappears, we don't know what happens to him. And so, yeah, it's a very difficult comparison. I think they are going to do something with Sevatar, probably in the upcoming Scouring. We're yet to see what's going to happen there, but both of those characters are creations of Aaron Dembski-Bowden. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll see some sort of crossover between them.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say, I've spoken about this a little bit before on the channel. ADB does write the series with a good deal of respect to a couple of the other Night Lords characters. So yeah, Sevatar is not there. They do wonder in the series, where is Sevatar? It is a thing that the Night Lords are like, because Sevatar is the obvious leader, you know, and yeah, Quipster rightly points out just how good a Blades Master he is. The only person that really people could point to and be like, that guy could beat Sigismund among the Space Marines, potentially, you know, when he cheats. But but the other character, of course, is Sahar, which I say comes from Lords of the Night, and he is the character who retrieves the Corona Nox. And of course, that is the thing that the Night Lords have to remember, because whereas, you know, and I think ADB has spoken about this a little bit, Talos is an obvious candidate for the person who will unite the Night Lords Legion, and indeed, that's what the Craft Worlders are afraid of. But ADB kind of implies that there's a bunch of people who could do this. Sevatar is another one, Sahar is another one, and Talos. And there's lots of, in theory, there's lots of Night Lords that could put themselves forward to be the person to unite the Legion. So there's always stuff open there, and the fact that Decimus is, you know, the fact that they've done nothing with Decimus since the series is wild. Isn't that insane? Do you ever, like, Games Workshop make some very weird decisions in my mind. Like, one of the things that they don't do that I find very bizarre is writing more like Imperial Armor style tomes, just because those have had such a massive impact on the fandom, and some people are understandably so obsessed with them, and you know, still their favorite books to this day. And the other is a character like Decimus. Like, for all the MacGuffins and like one-off characters that people introduce, and they're like, oh, maybe nothing will happen with that. The fact that Decimus is still there, and admittedly, like you say, it's an ADB character. ADB is still writing for Games Workshop, so it's whenever he wants to pick it up again, and he's still got to finish the Black Legion series on top of Scouring stuff and whatever else he's working on. But it is kind of mad that he's never got a model. You know, at the very least, give him a model, give him some chapter codex excerpts, give him something. You know, it's sort of wild, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, there is so much you could do with a Night Lord storyline, and like from a personal perspective, I always thought that if I was ever going to do a Chaos faction, it would be Night Lords. And they would be, ironically, like loyalist Night Lords, but because it's me. But yeah, I think with Decimus specifically, it almost seems like he is a character of such potential importance that they've got him locked in some sort of, in case of emergency break container, because he could be the linchpin of a reunification of the Night Lords Legion, and the reunification of any Legion, let alone the Night Lords, is an incredible deal. And so, yeah, I think maybe they're saving this for, something where they're like, this is the
Yeah.
time.
And to be fair, they don't have to go straight into the Night Lords are now unified, because they can sort of build up to it. But yes, they definitely should do. And it's worth pointing out, I guess, that there have been multiple Night Lords boxes released in the form of Kill Team boxes, which is a big deal. Something that they never had before to this degree, not properly. And so, yeah, that's huge. And I think it's likely they'll get a character at some point. I think Games Workshop know how popular the faction is. Like, they are so popular. And yeah, I mean, 2 kill teams is a lot for a non like Black Legion faction. So yes, it's yeah, they're definitely out there, and yeah, hopefully they will get something in the future. I'm just going to go into chat just for a bit, mate. We can answer some questions, and I'm sure that we'll continue going through things. Yes, lots of people very excited for this topic, which is great. Someone asking, were you on Tabletop Tactics?
I wasn't. Were you?
No. We do know those guys, though. We have met those a few times,
yep.
and they're super nice. If you are interested in, oh, have I frozen? Oh no, I'm unfrozen. Yes, if you are interested in learning how to play the tabletop, they are very, very good. They will have, I'm sure, incredible how to play 11th edition content when they're allowed to post it. But yes, definitely worth checking out. Talos is like Dexter, psycho through and through, but with rules to. Who to be a psycho to. Yes, I get where you're coming from. It is, in a way, it's a very popular idea, isn't it? Like that sort of weird, yes, weird, kind of a very tight line of morality that he can weave is a popular idea.
So the thing I will say about Dexter is I haven't seen the show, but as far as I'm aware, Dexter is a serial killer who only takes out like horrible people. Essentially,
I only know it from the memes, but that's as I understand it.
Okay.
Yes.
So that is the original conceit of the Night Lords. Like, it's correct.
Kind of. Yeah.
But the thing I love about the Night Lords specifically is their utter hypocrisy.
Sure.
Because they at no point think to themselves, okay, we're the bad guys. Like, we're just evil. Everything they do is like, we're trying to prove a point. Like the Night Haunter, Conrad Curze, he's like, no, the Imperium is corrupt, and with my sacrifice, not even death, my sacrifice, I will prove the hypocrisy of the Imperium, completely discounting the fact. And this comes up in his Primarch novel. There's a bit where he executes a woman who is trying to commit suicide, and he says, I'm sorry, but suicide is a sin, therefore I have to kill you. And she's like, but I don't want to anymore. He's like, sorry, I don't make the rules. And so, but the thing is, that's what you hear him say, because you hear, it says the dialogue, but you also hear his internal thoughts, and he's licking his lips because he can't wait to eat her.
Yeah, he's
and it's
yes. I get where you're coming from. Yes, I think as well, the other thing that's probably worth pointing out from that book, once you rightly bring it up, is that when it comes to Conrad Curze, that book does make it pretty clear, and this is an important chapter where he talks about how it's actually not ADB, it's is it Guy Haley, I think?
I think so, yeah.
He talks about how Conrad Curze's visions are not always right. Importantly, they're not always right. So there's this important scene where Conrad Curze, he's Conrad Curzing all over the place, and there's this young boy, and Conrad Curze, when he meets him and they're having a kerfuffle, he sees multiple visions, and like in one of them, the boy gets like, I think he gets like a stab in. He stabs Conrad Curze, and then he escapes, and then he grows up to become like a crime lord. And in another one, Conrad Curze teaches him how to be like Conrad Curze lets him live and teaches him like the way to behave, and then he ends up like helping change Nostromo for the better. And Conrad Curze eventually just kills him, but it is revealed at the end of this chapter that he dropped the knife. The Conrad Curze's vision looks like it's like possibilities, but sometimes he is just wrong. And this goes back to the argument that he has with Sanguinius in Pharos and their heresy, where their viewpoint is that Sanguinius knows that futures aren't set, and Conrad Curze believes that they are, which is sort of why later on in Ruinstorm, Sanguinius, when he rejects him to space, he kind of is pretty savage. He's like, if you believe futures are set, here's your future, and then he just ejects him. And yeah, it's pretty horrific. So yes, I think it's important to remember, because I think that it is very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that because Conrad Curze said it, it is so, and that is a good thing to mention.
Agreed.
Sorry.
I mean, it'd be interesting to get your take on this as well. On reading that particular bit in the Curze novel, my takeaway was that he can't see past his own decisions. Like, he can't see branching timelines in the way that Sanguinius can. But it's because he can't see past the decisions that he made on that timeline. So, for example, he kills that boy, and he can't see, therefore, the other, past that moment, he can't see the other branching timelines. So he thinks everything is linear, even though it's just his decisions that are making it that way.
For sure. Anyway, this trilogy was my first GW book. Was I spoiled? Talos is awesome, although not sure about the love stuff between the Navigator and the Servant. Yeah, I guess. Interesting. I mean, I think you are spoiled in a way. It does. I think that you won't. Like, in terms of we've had a bunch of other Night Lords characters that I think have been pretty good. I think that Morven Val with the Death of Saints does a really good job of portraying a very compelling Night Lord's character, and Remnant Blades, the book that came out this year, was also pretty good. But you're never going to get the level of lore that you get with the Night Lords trilogy in both the just how vital and how pivotal the character could be in the setting. They're all going to have this guy could reunify the Legion, but it's unlikely to hit as hard as Talos being foreseen to do it by the Craftworld all the way. And the other is in terms of just that you have this viewpoint of him going from the heresy through to interacting with Abaddon, future interacting with Huron, and each time defining himself as just this badass legendary warrior. And ultimately he goes out against the Phoenix Lord, which, as much as we joke about Phoenix Lords, they are supposed to be some of the best warriors in the entire setting. So it is just, I in a way, you are spoiled. You're very unlikely, I think, to ever get a Night Lord's character that has just so much to him. Do you know what I mean? I can't see how you're going to match that. I think it's a real challenge. And in a way, whenever I see a Night Lord's character in a book, I'm like, I kind of feel sorry for the author, because you're just going to compare them to Talos, and he hits so hard. I mean, every all the comments are always going to be like, "Where's Decimus? Why are we not Decimus back?" It's I don't know about you, but yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I think there are a lot of quite rubbish Black Library novels. Not to name any, Fist of the Imperium.
Yeah.
But I do think there, for the longest time, I actually didn't read the Night Lords Omnibus because everyone kept on recommending it to me. And when you don't want to read something just because everyone's like, oh my God, it's the best thing ever. And then I read it and I was like, oh my God, actually, this is one of the best Black Library novels I've ever read in my life.
Yes, fair. Has Sandman done a Huron video? I don't think I've ever really done a video on Huron. Yes, one of the things about Huron as a character, in terms of doing him properly, is that, I spoke about this before, I have long suspected they will do a book on the Badab War. They did a book on the Siege of Rax a couple of years ago, and it did very well. It was it might even have been the most popular book of that year. It was oh no, I think it wasn't, but it lost to the end of the heresy. It was it did absurdly well, and I don't know if you read that book, mate, but that book it's barely a novel. It's really just supplementary material for people who have read the Imperial Armor Tomes, which is what, and it shows you how big those books are, that people bought that in droves. It was incredibly popular. Now, just as they've gone back and they've done a novel for Fall of Cadia, I am quietly confident, and the Siege of Rags, that they'll do one for the Badab Wars, or at least some for the Badab Wars. The Carcharodons have got 4 novels, which is just ridiculous. That's so more than the Raven Guard and the White Scars have properly in 40k. That's so many books. And so I think that it really shows you how popular those factions are, and all of the Badab War chapters are beloved pretty pretty much. Even like the Mantis Warriors, you know, people ride for them, you know. And so, yeah, I think that you would definitely see a Bad War book at some point, and I guess I'm sort of waiting for that. I think I could maybe make one now based on a Huron's novel by Mike Brooks, which is, but in a way, I have a very different take on Huron than a lot of people, because as people will know, I like Abaddon as a character. I think he's a very good character, and Huron's novel, which is his only real novel, is sort of proof of that, because, you know, he loses in the Night Lords trilogy because the Night Lords are the POV characters, but in Huron's own novel, he doesn't look that good as a character. He like as a leader, and people that like him want him to replace Abaddon, but the truth is he barely has command of the Red Corsairs. Like a random Blood Angel basically swans in and steals them from him, and yeah, he wins in the end, but like it's still kind of embarrassing. Also, the interesting thing is pretty much all of those new models are in that book. And that's quite an interesting thing that they followed that up. But yeah, I guess I guess it'd be, I don't know what angle to take. Like at the end of that book, he does retrieve a Zechian MacGuffin, which could be very important for the Red Corsairs in the future. But I guess I'm just sort of, I guess I will probably, there's a lot of topics I want to cover before then, so I will probably hold off for the Bad War book, which I have no reason, like to clarify, I don't get rumors or anything, I have no reason to think it's coming, but I'm quietly confident we'll do at some point. Yeah.
I mean, I will say the weakness, in my opinion, of Huron's character is the fact that aside from being a really good pirate, he doesn't have aspirations in the same way Abaddon has. So his nose is never that far away from, like, what are we doing as the Red Corsairs? How much power can we amass? Whereas Abaddon has the end goal of usurping the Imperium and killing the Emperor. And it's very obvious that everything he does is in that direction for that goal. And so, yeah, I like Huron. I think it's interesting delving into his, you know, psychology of leadership and how he actually keeps the, you know, this such a disparate band together. But yeah, I don't think he has the overall goal that lends him to be an actual rival to Abaddon in the same way.
I think as well, in the stuff Huron doesn't get, it's kind of, it's just too much of a bridge to gaps. Like Abaddon's thing, like people don't talk about this enough when it comes to Abaddon. Abaddon seemingly has all of this knowledge that he shouldn't have. Like he knows about the war in heaven. He understands so much better than anyone else, any other Chaos character, any other Imperial character, how the war in heaven unfolded, you know. And that's even before he meets Vashtor. And that shouldn't be the case. And like I said, Abaddon seems to know all this stuff, and he seems to be genuinely doing what he can. Now, there's the question of, which Talos brings up, is Abaddon really uncorrupted? Has he actually gone too far? But as far as we know, he's still his own man. And Huron Blackheart is in the position of going, and this is what he says in the book, and I think it's in Pandarax as well, he says this, where he's like, oh, if I had been alive, since Abaddon had been alive, I would have won already. And it's like, dude, you just don't. That's just such it's just so naive. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it kind of feels like, you know, it feels like someone just making a really naive statement in real life. Like, how would you have done this, Huron? Like, do you have any idea what it's like to try and command Angron? Do you have any idea how hard that is? Like, you know, like, do you even know how to begin making? Like, he can't just, you know, someone just steals the Red Corsairs from him, but he's like, oh no, if I wanted to make Magnus kneel, I could do it. And you're just like, all right, mate. Like, he just such a young whippersnapper compared to that. I think the one aspect of him, I must say, that in terms of like the War Master thing, and he sort of brings this up in his novel actually by Mike Brooks, is that realistically, Huron Blackheart is probably an Ultramarine, right? Because most Space Marines are Ultramarines in 40k, right? Because of the Ultramarines gene seed being preferred by Terra and blah blah blah. So he's probably an Ultramarine, which is actually quite cool, because in theory, one of the most powerful Chaos Lords is a son of the Lord Commander. So that's a cool angle to go down. But outside of that, it's just he's just got a long way to go. And he very, like, they don't really the little gremlin that he has, they don't really explain it, because it's right at the end of the Imperial Armor Tomes and story, and it's the start of the Red Corsairs novels. He's just kind of like, he's just got it, and he just kind of accepts gifts, and you're like, okay, you're very different to Abaddon in theory, but like, yeah, I yeah, he doesn't know what he doesn't know. Do you know what I mean? So it's a funny one, but he is a very good character, and I must say, like, I really like. There's a bit in Pandarax where Abaddon's kind of annoyed at him. Sorry, Abaddon's kind of like manipulating him, and Abaddon says something like, at the end of the day, you're basically waiting for me to die so you can try and become the new War Master, and Huron's just like, I mean. Yeah, like he doesn't even deny it. Just good character. So yes, I get it, but I think weirdly, it's because of the first book of the Nightless trilogy where Talos rejects Abaddon. That is where everybody's belief of like Abaddon is a nothing burger comes from. I think because it's such a popular series, but Huron also doesn't do a particularly good job of commanding Talos's respect. So at the end of the day.
So there's two things about that. I will say. So number one,
go carry on.
I was going to say it's fascinating that Abaddon knows to go to Talos directly to try and recruit him. Like, because the knowledge that essentially Talos is like the chosen of Conrad Curze would not be knowledge known very well outside the Legion. So he would have had to have commanded enough respect from Night Lords that have joined the Black Legion for them to A, tell him, and B, for him to have corroborated that with whatever chaos powers that he has, for him to suddenly go, oh, actually, we should get Talos with us. So like, I think that speaks to not weakness, but I think in some ways strength, that he's gone, I know exactly who I need on my team. And then sort of on a sort of funnier flip side than that, one of my favorite moments in all of Warhammer is the bit where First Claw are hiding behind the Terminators, who are storming that loyalist chapter fortress. And the Red Corsairs are like, fight, you bastards! Like, you stupid cowards, just do something. And they're like, yeah, sorry, I can't see anyone. Just firing of shots around the legs of these Terminators.
Yes. Yeah, the Genesis chapter, I think it is.
Something like that,
yes. Yes. Ricardo, hey mate. Who is Talos, the Soul Hunter? Who is Decimus, the Prophet of the Eighth Legion? Who is the Night Haunter's heir? Whoever wields the crown and commands the Nightfall. Ave Dominus Nox. Yes, I guess worth pointing out that again, the Nightfall again, Gloriana class battleship of the Night Lords, notably absent from the Night Lord series, and that's pretty much by design. I think it's mentioned at the Siege of Terra, of course, but outside of that, I don't think there's any mention of it in 40k. I don't know if they've ever done anything with it since then. So, yes, it's a Sevatar. It's left open for future writers to pull upon if they need to, I guess. Yes, Conrad Curze got the worst job of the Legion. Pre-heresy, all the other Primarchs have a noble or at least an honorable function. Biggie, my son, your job is to torture and be evil. Conrad Curze, thanks, Dad. So to be entirely fair, no, you've unfrozen me. To be entirely fair, Conrad Curze's job in his series, his Primarch novel, is basically implied to be like the judge of the Primarchs. That's the word that's used, the judge. And of course, with his abilities of foresight, that's what he's doing. And even when this woman attempts to commit suicide, he prejudges her guilty because that is a crime, and his view of the Imperium. And in a way, that's what drove him mad, was these visions. So yes, he does have that role, and that's what he really realistically should have been. It just got twisted into something horrific because of his upbringing and the torturous vision of his own death. But yes, I've never read any of the alternate heresies, but I don't know if you have, mate, but like when you think of like loyalist Curze, or if a Curze has, let's say, landed upon Terra, what do you think he would have been like under the guise of sane Curze, honorable Curze? What would he have been like?
So this is the interesting thing about Curze. He doesn't start off in the Great Crusade as that bad. He's very dogmatic, but he's not crazy. There's a good example of this in interaction he has with Vulcan. With Magnus the Red. There's this big library of books and knowledge that this alien species or this renegade faction has accumulated, and the Thousand Sons are protecting it, and they're like, right, okay, we've got to save this knowledge, and Curze kind of rightfully says, well, actually, this knowledge is prescribed. We are not allowed to have it. Therefore, I'm going to burn it all because those are the rules. And Magnus tries to save all of this knowledge because he's like, no, 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 all knowledge is sacred. We must save and preserve as much of this as possible. And Curze is sitting there, really annoyingly, like retracting and unretracting his claws, specifically trying to annoy Magnus. But he's also, in terms of the perspective of the Imperium, he's also correct in that those are the rules. It's only later, as he progresses and his madness progresses, that he goes down this pathway of just total destruction of everything and anyone in this sort of like nihilistic, a crusade of his own. Another really good example is the interaction he has with Vulcan. He in the Vulcan book, I think it's I can't remember which one, not Old Earth, the first one. I think it's Vulcan Lives, where the Night Lords and the Salamanders fight together, and the Night Lords go into the city and they skin everyone, literally everyone, and they project the screams of them brutally murdering everyone in this city across the entire planet, and the entire rest of the planet surrenders. And he goes to Vulcan when Vulcan comes to him and says, "How could you possibly have done this? This is madness." And quite rightly, the Night Haunter says to Vulcan, "Okay, but I've killed less people doing this than you would have conquering all of the rest of these cities. I have actually saved lives in what I'm doing." And he's not wrong. There's method, to quote Hamlet, there's method in his madness. Because he's not actually mad at this point. He's just following very, very strictly the rules that have been given to him and the morality and the moral structure that he has. It's only later on that he begins to go actually completely insane. And that's when the wheels start to really fall off.
Yeah.
It's interesting in that process as well, how the only person to call him out is Sevatar.
Yes.
Like no one else does it. And it's in the scene where he's
actually Elva does right at the end of
yes,
right at the end. Elva did, which I did a video on, which came out last year, which you should watch. It's very good if you haven't watched it. And yes, Elva is this unfortunate crewmate of Conrad Curze who shares a voyage with him to Seguelsa for the final trip of Conrad Curze. And right at the end, he realizes that Conrad Curze kind of fears he might be wrong, and and then Conrad Curze has him killed because he notices. And I think actually it probably would have been Talos that killed him, but it doesn't actually clarify.
Probably.
Yeah. Oh, you frozen again? Yeah, sorry, mate.
That's right.
Let me do another question. Hello, Sleep Club. Hope you're doing well. I don't want to jinx it, but the Night Lords feature heavily in the promo material for the upcoming Dark Heresy game. Maybe we'll see some Night Lord arch development there. Yes, you are right. That I am really excited for that. Someone asking like whether that will have big lore implications as well. Yeah, good question. So hopefully, and I will say immediately it's going to be big because of I played the preview that they had of it, and the Tyrant Star features heavily from what I've seen so far, and that is, if you're not familiar, the Tyrant Star comes from what we call the Death Watch RPG lore, which is like this. The RPG lore had all these like massive implications in theory and could have been huge, but it's just stuff they never really picked up on because they created it to leave it out there for RPG fans to utilize for the future. And when, you back, mate? All good. And so like the tyrant star is a star. Is basically what it sounds like. It's a star that is living and thinking, and like it's a malevolent force in the galaxy. But we've never known much about it at all. So just getting tyrant star lore on its own is huge for us. And yeah, immediately it's going to be very big. But in terms of how the Night Lords can have a bigger role, perhaps it's not impossible. I think. Like yeah, introducing big lore through video games is definitely something I think Games Workshop are okay with. There's like I do know this like from speaking to people who have done the video games before, where Games Workshop's viewpoint now is that everything is canon, right? So not everything that has ever been written is canon, but everything from this point outwards, they want it to fit in 40k's canon. So everything from Tacticus onwards is, you know, your gameplay isn't canon, but like they will put canon things into those games. And so the idea that like they introduce a big character through a video game like Titus, or the idea that they have a big lore development in like Traitors and the Infinites getting an expansion in Rogue Trader, like these things genuinely will be impactful and could be impactful. So of course Games Workshop's incentive is to try and get you to buy everything, so that's why they're going to do it. So it's pretty exciting times, and I can't wait to see what happens there. So I was a big fan of Rogue Trader, and I'm hyped for Dark Heresy, definitely. I feel like making 50% of the Night Lords choose to act as loyalists, irrespective of their views of the Imperium, would be interesting. Wow, they're just all criminals and monsters, mate, pretty much. So it's...
Well, actually, you say this. There is one story in the Heresy about a loyalist Night Lord. I don't know if you've read that one, but it's a story where a loyalist Night Lord and a loyalist Raven Guard go on a mission together, and how their like conflicting tactical doctrines and ideologies conflict with each other. It's funny, it's fascinating. It's just a tiny little short story, but there were some Night Lords that were loyalist, and I think exploring that could be fascinating, because it's like, why? Because they were one of the most homogeneously like bad, awful people legions. So it's interesting to see like why they like any of them would have stayed loyal.
Well, there would have been Terran Night Lords. That's an obvious
Sure.
one. Yeah, and in theory, all of them have some loyalist elements, even if we don't see them in books. But yeah, so which again is, you know, partly to sell models, right? They want people to try and make their own version. Also, best thing Curze did was blowing up Nostromo rather than allow it to stretch to 40k. Yes, I mean, it would have gotten blown up anyway, so... but certainly, yes, it was a decisive point for his character. If Curze was brought back now, how could it happen? And why and what would he have now? Yeah, I mean, if they were going to do it, he's one of... Like, I don't think all dead Primarchs are necessarily dead forever, and whilst I don't think we'll see them in, like, you know, next edition or anything like that, in theory, in decades to come, we might see them. Conrad Curze is less likely. Same with Sanguinius, because their deaths are important. They have to mean something for the character. So to bring them back is to undo a lot of that juicy lore that people love about the faction. But the obvious answer is the Corona Nox. So this is the other Night Lord, like Old Night Lords book, Lords of the Night, where so in that book the Corona Nox is sought after by the Craftwarders. And if the Craftwarders are seeking it, logically, it's important to them. Perhaps an obvious explanation would be that they don't want Sahal, who's the character Night Lord in that book, to unite the Night Lord's Legion. But the other option, of course, is that it is of immense value in that it has something like a Spirit Stone in it, which has led a lot of people to theorize that perhaps Conrad Curze's soul was trapped in his Spirit Stone, and he could be restored, akin to a Wraith Knight or something like that. I will say as well, in Conrad Curze's Primarch novel, he creates this like effigy of the Emperor, and the effigy of the Emperor it speaks to Conrad Curze, and it's up to you to interpret whether it's just Conrad Curze being mad or whether it's actually the Emperor. I like to have fun and assume it's actually the Emperor. And when it speaks to Conrad Curze, it specifically says that none of you are beyond redemption. So in theory, he's foreseen everything. The Emperor is incredibly powerful and knows that Conrad Curze could be healed, restored, pulled out of the warp. He does imply he could fix Ferrus Manus even. So it's there's a lot out there.
I mean, there's even a bit at the end of the Heresy where the Emperor intimates that he might be able to save Horus. I will wait for you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes. Super chat. Thank you so much. Gun for Bullets. Thanks so much to everybody who supports the channel. Really means so much, guys. I'm so so amazing that we get to do this. So yes. I wonder if we will ever find out what happens to Sevatar. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty likely. I think that I think ADB is likely planned for something, but yeah, we just yeah, he wanted to write Talos as its own separate thing, and if you'd introduced Sevatar, it would have overshadowed Talos probably. So yeah, and I guess given that Talos' story ultimately went down the aisle of like he was going to be the person to unite the Night Lords, having Sevatar there would have been a spanner to the works. Likewise, Sahal is notably absent from the series because he is another option of for the first captain. So yes, yeah, I don't know. What do you think, man? Do you think we'll get him?
I do think at some point Sevatar will return. I don't know, call me crazy, but I think everything that happened in the Heresy and all those characters that are still alive, something will happen to them in 40k. They will all get models and they will all be part of the timeline. That's why I think we're going to see all the Primarchs return. I don't know anything. This is just my supposition. I think we're going to see all the Primarchs return. I think we're going to see... I think you'll see Sanguinius return, but it will be like the ghost of Sanguinius. And so I think you'll see maybe like the avatar or the ghost of Conrad Curze, something like that. So yeah, I think as part of that, you will see Sevatar return. In what form? Who's to say? Who knows? I mean, what if Sevatar comes back and he's a loyalist? That would be mad.
Yes.
But I'd love it.
Yes, I think that there's lots of theories. Yes, I mean we do we do see one last short story of him, and he does kind of escape with the Dark Angels, and he does kind of give this speech. I am judgment, something like that. Yeah, so he intends to be. He intends to be more than just a traitor, very seriously, like what Conrad Curze should have been, I guess, that kind of aspect. And likewise, he is a blessed son. So he is incredibly powerful in theory. Some people theorize maybe he joined the Grey Knights. I think that's unlikely because there was already a Night Lord in the what they called Malcador's boys, the Grey
Chosen?
Knights Errant, the Knights Errant. So yes, I think it's unlikely he did that, and also it's kind of a waste of the Sevatar. Do you know what I mean? If you just make him the Grey Knight, but yes, I think it's not impossible that they would make him a loyalist, and yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that would be more interesting for him as a character. I don't know. Let's know in chat. Would you want Sevatar to be a loyalist, or would you want him to be traitor? Because I think of all of the characters people point to, and they'd be like, he could turn loyal, he could turn traitor. I think Sevatar has one of the best arguments because, like you pointed out, he kind of does see the flaws in Conrad Curze. Conrad Curze sees kind of the nobility in him, and Conrad Curze hates fucking everyone. So like there's a point in the Heresy where the Dark Angels kind of break the Night Lords. Weirdly, it's not covered in the novels, but in the Black Books, the Dark Angels wipe out, I think, 75% of the Night Lords, something like that. And that's in the Thramas Crusade. And when Conrad Curze finds out about this, he just doesn't care. He just doesn't care, like, because he thinks actually all his sons have died, if I remember correctly, and he just doesn't give a shit. He does like Sevatar, but like he just doesn't care. And it's like, yeah, it's even for Conrad Curze, you're like, damn, all right, he's having fun murdering people.
I think it's probably... I was just going to say, it's probably good to mention at this point that someone's going to mention at some point that, oh, hang on, how can Sevatar be a loyalist? He's the first person to ever say death to the false emperor.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, fair enough. But also, Sevatar doesn't really understand human emotions. And half the time when he's interacting with someone, he's doing what he thinks people do in those situations. Like, there's a bit where he like smiles at someone, and it's horrifying because he doesn't know how to smile, so he's like putting it on.
Yeah.
So I do think his like traitorous affiliation is as much an affectation as anything else. So I think it's possible.
Yes, I mean, and the other thing is, I guess there's sort of a nice mirror to it, because just as like Sevatar, yes, you're. It's a good thing, yeah. Well remembered, like, yeah, he is the first person to say "Death to the False Emperor," and that, of course, then becomes the chant of the traitors. In a way, there's sort of there'd be a beautiful mirror there, because Lorgar, of course, wrote the Lectitio Divinitatum. Pretty certain I pronounced that correctly this time, and of course he's now a traitor primarch. He's arguably a bad guy in Warhammer 40k, and this kind of comes up in the Night Lords series, where of course 10,000 years later, when the Night Lords are back in the Imperium, they of course find out that the Imperials are like prayer addled lunatics, I think is the phrasing they use, and like they're just disgusted with them, and they laugh when they find out that Lorgar was basically right, and Lorgar's sort of this. They take a pleasure in sort of just seeing the fact that the madness of Lorgar ended up, becoming this incredible aspect of the Imperium in the future, and so it's pretty funny. And yes, maybe there is a nice mirror there for Sevatar.
I mean, there's a lot to be said for the possibility of loyalist Night Lords who are loyal to the old idea of what the Imperium was, which still makes them renegades. But I mean, sort of going on from the Wordbearers point a little bit, I saw an interview a while ago with Aaron Dembski-Bowden, where he outlined what he wanted to happen with the with the Wordbearers storyline and Lorgar specifically. He wanted to kill Lorgar, and his exact words were, "I wanted him to die like a dog," in the knowledge that he was wrong. Which I think would have been amazing and wild. Like, Lorgar realizes he's wrong after destroying the Imperium, goes, "Oh, sorry guys, my bad."
Yeah. No, for sure. I get where you're coming from. Is Talos the guy that got stomped by Raldoron? No, you are thinking of
It's the Painted Count.
Yes, the Painted Count, and yes, he is in 40k though. He does survive, and yes, a tragic tale of that you can't believe people haven't learned that you can't trust demons all the time. It is objectively it's one of the funnier demon betrayals, isn't it? Realistically, because yes, the thing that you're referring to, I think it's in First Wall. It was probably First Wall, where the Night Lords are some of the. In fact, they are the first to land on the wall. In the siege, and when that comes up again in the Night Lords trilogy, and people don't believe them, but they actually were. And yes, so like he's this Painted Count is possessed by a demon, and so he's wielding incredible power, just blowing blood angels aside all over the place. And then he challenges Raldoron, because he's like, I'll kill Raldoron, this legendary blood angel, it'll be awesome. And then the demon betrays him, and he gets like kicked off the wall. So it's pretty funny.
I will say that's one of my favorite encounters in the Heresy, because there's this moment where the Painted Count, he sees this brightly colored like red and gold Astartes off, and he sees Raldoron on the pauldron. He goes, "Oh my god, that's Raldoron! Let's go!" And he's like, "I could kill Raldoron. This will make me a legend." And so he tries to do it, and he's doing well. And the demon goes, "That's enough." And the moment before he gets kicked off the wall, something happens, and he goes like, "I am the Painted Count." And Raldoron just goes, "Never heard of you." He just kicks him off the wall, and it's one of my favorite moments ever.
Yeah. No, it is an important lesson for us all there. The book made me see Abaddon in a new light. In the famous speech, Talos says they will join the War Master. He realizes Abaddon is the best chance. And to be fair, you do make your point. The Night Lords do support the 13th Black Crusade, and they are pretty important in it. So it is, it's worth remembering that they are still, there are still many of them loosely aligned to him, and as they are leaderless, of course, there are going to be various war bands of different persuasions. Can we just stick Abaddon, Huron, Talos, and Honzao into a room and see what happens? Talos, no, because he's dead. Honzao, I don't think is going to come out of that on top. I like Honzao as a character. Oh, I've frozen. Oh, I've really frozen.
You back?
Okay. But yes, I think Abaddon wins that hands down. I think, you know, even if you just look at the models, right, as nice as the hero model is, Abaddon is designed to be opposite a Guilliman. That's what those models are designed to do. So they very much put them on a different level. We're really waiting for a novel that properly, you know, outright says Abaddon could now take a Primarch, or at least heavily imply it. But yeah,
I mean, technically he can.
Assume it. What, because of
technically
Horus clone?
Yeah, because the Horus clone.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the Horus clone is as good as you get. I guess, you know, then you get into the debate of clones and souls and everything, but yeah, I get where you come from.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I think ADB did say, to be fair, that when Abaddon fought and killed the Horus clone, that was a proper Primarch powered figure. I can't remember his exact quote, but he basically said that. And I think it makes most sense, right? Like, Fabius does get pretty... Fabius' story is much more interesting if he actually can clone Primarchs. Sevatar meeting Cypher might be interesting. That would be an interesting one. Yeah, I don't know how that would go down. I think that because like weirdly, of course, most of the Cypher theories are based around the Alpha Legion. The Alpha Legion and the Dark Angels don't really have much of a history. Not none, and they do interact. We see in like the Great Crusade, but really the Dark Angels and the Heresy are opposite the Night Lords. That's what we see them opposite most of the time. And Typhus is often a big thorn in their side, but really it's the Night Lords. So Sevatar being Cypher, I could actually buy, I think, more than Omegon because of just the history of the two chapters. And of course, last time we see Sevatar, he's literally with Night Lords, Dark Angel, sorry. Does Talos wear a Mark 7 helmet? It's Mark 5. Bobble is Mark 5, which is not got a plastic release yet, but hopefully won't be too long away, because in a way I think of Mark 5 as the Heresy armor. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like cobbled together, a mess, and you got the grill that of course would have come to dominate the 40k landscape. So yes, I think Games Workshop led with Mark 6 because the Beaky is the first proper Space Marine model, so that's why they do it. But I think of Mark 5 as the proper Heresy armor because it's properly like cobbled together nonsense, and yeah, that's the Heresy, right?
So I can tell you that it's coming soon, because if you look in the artwork for the Horus Heresy rule books, it's got new patterns of Mark 4 and Mark 5, and so it's like, that's what those models are going to look like.
Yes, I get where you're coming from. Yeah. Do you think the Black Templars' Eternal Crusade inspired the Black Crusades? I guess in a way they do. Like, so at the end of the first Black Legion novel, when Abaddon like declares war on the Imperium, he does so using the Black Sword of Sigismund. So that's sort of, there's an inspiration there, I guess. Gendor Skravok, yes. Space Sharks are heavily implied to be Raven Guard. I think Shade Lord specifically was a Raven Guard title. You pretty much have no argument for anyone other than Raven Guard, realistically. I've actually had help from people in Discord who have voiced some parts of me, and the Raven Guard are the Carcharodons are definitely the exiled Raven Guard. I mean, like the book doesn't literally say it, so but it doesn't have to. We can be so confident in that estimation. So yes, nothing. Yeah, I don't think I was really going to fight you on that one. It would be dope if Guilliman let the Lion borrow the Emperor's sword and shield with and body Perturabo. Yeah, it would be cool. Seeing that would be just so epic. Excuse my hand. Oh, sorry, Mr. Super Chat. If you had to spend 24 hours with one Night Lord, who would it be and why? Explain like you would to someone who hasn't read the books. If you had to spend 24 hours with one Night Lord, I mean, yeah, it's gonna be it's going to be Talos or Sevatar or some Terran loyalist, isn't it, realistically?
I mean, if you were going to be really cheesy about it, you could say the body of Conrad Curze. Because he's not going to get up and kill you.
So I guess, yes, to explain to someone if you haven't read the book, so yes, I'll explain like this. So the reason that's such a tough question is because the Night Lords are so horrible as a legion that Conrad Curze himself hated them. And the reason he hated them is because of the Night Lords that were recruited from Nostramo, Conrad Curze's wishes were not heeded to, and the rulers of Nostramo sent just the worst of the worst to join the Night Lords. So they sent the criminals and gang sons of gang leaders, and all this sort of horrific, all these horrific recruits to join the Legion. So they're all complete monsters, and that's their upbringing, and that's part of the reason Conrad Curze ultimately would go back and destroy Nostramo, because it had fallen back into just horrific levels of crime and brutality. So they're just a horrible lot. However, all of the legions to some degree had sons that came from Terra, because of course for a long time before the primarchs were found, they had to have sons recruited from somewhere, and at the beginning it was from Terra. And so they will have, that's where if you're going to build like a loyalist Night Lords force, you're probably going to base your lore, or you're going to do like some sort of like prophecy route where you have a son like Talos, like Sevatar, a son who has some sort of vision of the future, and that allows them to retain loyalty to the Emperor. But yes, pretty much all of them that we see in the books are just complete monsters, and there are very few exceptions. And even like Talos, like Crips was saying earlier, people really like the way he treats his serfs, and like the way he can go and rescue Octavia is quite noble in a way. But she is still a slave. Like, she still has a horrible life. And so, yes, it's all over the place. But yes, I guess Decimus, Talos, Sevatar, some Terran. That's probably your best bet. Quipster?
Yeah, I agree. It's probably going to have to be Talos or Sevatar. Because Sevatar, you'd probably be able to have a conversation with, as you would Talos. But most of the rest of the Night Lords, they do something like fucked up and horrible to you. Like, they'd like chop off one of your legs and eat it in front of you just because they can, kind of thing. But they'd like really nicely suture up your leg so that you survived to watch it. Like some of the horrible nonsense like that. But I think Talos would probably like have a conversation with you, and I don't think Sevatar would do that unless he had a reason to, unless like killing you meant a way out of this room that you're locked in together. I don't think he'd like murder you horribly otherwise.
Yes. Well, like Talos does that. I think Septimus has his arm cut off, and when Talos stitches him up, he uses like Astartes level materials to fix it, which is like, a nice thing. But yes, you're pretty much right. I saw a bullshit video yesterday claiming that the Carcharodons are a remnant of the 2nd and 11th, and Tyberos is the Primarch. Yeah, definitely false. I mean, yes. I mean, if you've read any of the Raven Guard 30k lore or the Carcharodons lore, it is very obvious who the Carcharodons are supposed to be. Basically, they are the when Corvus Corax was reunited with the Raven Guards, you get this like weird hypocrisy going on because Corvus Corax was a freedom fighter, right? That's what he was. And so when he finds his legion, reunited with his legion, he's kind of disgusted that some of his sons employ the same tactics that the overlords on the moon he was on, like I say, used to utilize. So he banishes some of them to like the voids, to the edges of the galaxy, and it's obviously that's the case, that is who the Carcharodons become, because they use the term Void Father, they use the term term Shade Lord as to describe Tyberos, which is the name of a leader in the Raven Guard, and everything that they say aligns with the Raven Guard. So yes, we can be pretty. It doesn't literally say that they are Raven Guard, because the whole point is that they've kind of forgotten who they once were. But to believe they're anyone else is madness. Sandman. But the fight is literally one parry. My son, says Horus, looking at Abaddon, and then he stabs him with the claw. It literally is that. It's not truly a fight, more like a reunion. So I get where you're coming from, but it's not quite that quick. I can see your argument. You're saying that because the fight is so short, therefore Abaddon just kind of like got a quick blow, and therefore that was the win. But I'll double check, but I'm pretty certain there is a little bit more to the fight than that. And that is important because Horus doesn't see Abaddon as his son. He's not holding back. And the fact that Abaddon, even if he's able to get a quick win versus a Primarch, is ridiculous. And this is before he started accepting most of his gifts from Chaos. So I can understand the argument and I can buy that, but I'm pretty certain that there is more to their fight than just like one. Gerard Butler, yes, Squipster is back. Yes, lots of comments asking for you back, mate. People are very happy to see you.
I'm always happy to come back.
Yeah. Where were we? The lion will body Abaddon. The Horus clone didn't have his juice. You could argue that, and certainly the lion, because when the lion returns, Zabriel, yes, Zabriel says to the lion that like the big bad is Abaddon now, and Abaddon, the lion kind of scoffs. He's like, "Oh, that'll be easy. We'll sort that out." Nothing. I mean, Mortarion calls him like Horus's little runt or something like that. So it's there's definitely some who believe they could easily take Abaddon. No questions asked.
I mean, to be fair, the equivalent is finding out your friend's kid brother has become like the big bad of the universe.
Yeah. Super chat. Did you guys find the Skin Taker interesting? So I did like him as a character. Sorry, of course, I don't know if you've read the new Night Lords book.
No, not yet.
No, so it is. He is a good character, and I probably will do a video on him at some point. But I think because one of the most interesting parts of that book is once again in this Night Lords, they're going to try and get themselves a ship. It's a black ship that they're trying to get. And so you get to see inside a black ship, which is pretty cool. And so I think that was one of the few instances we've seen in the lore, kind of diving a bit more into that. And there is definitely the Remnant Blades are definitely, there's a lot of similarities, right? I guess in that you see them recruit Space Marines from other legions into their warband, and they're being played once again by more powerful warlords. And so yes, the Skin Taker is an interesting character. Again, you get this really interesting insight in that book in terms, I guess this is the level that ADB set, whereas Talos's interesting relationships are with the human serfs, the Skin Taker's interesting relationships are with with the Magos on his ship and like cool stuff like that, which I think that again shows a lot to the character, because people want to see how a traitorous warband could actually work. I think in that novel, I think that when they get down to like 11 Marines, they're betrayed by the that Chaos warband, the Crimson Slaughter, and so they're called like it's the Gore Lord or something like that. It's the leader of that renegade chapter, and so. Yes. Anyway, but yeah, so I did like it. You are always going to read those books and think he's not Talos, but yes, I thought it was actually pretty good. I actually preferred the Death of Saints, who is the Night Lord from another recent novel, Morven Val, where that was such an interesting character. If you haven't read that one, guys, he is a character who his sister is an Imperial Saint. And he's such a good character because he's so tormented by the fact that because he does kill her, long before the book takes place, but then he's forever tormented by her existence, and he was such a wonderfully tragic character. Yeah, I've loved him. So yeah, I was very sad. He does die at the end of the book, spoiler, but I wish he hadn't died. He was much better. But as to whether we'll see more of the Remnant Blades, I think it's pretty likely. I think I don't know how well that book did, but the book does end once again with this sort of insinuation that they can rebuild the Remnant Blades. They could go further. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's not Talos. It's not Talos. I love Abaddon as a villain. He's just a glorious bastard. Yes, I did a whole stream with Christian where we were kind of glazing Abaddon and trying to do some justice to him. I think that Abaddon he gets a bad rap, I think, largely from two things. Three things, I think. I think A, Horus Rising, B, the Night Lords series, and C, people misunderstanding how the Black Crusades work. So
Mm.
the first is Horus Rising, where he is a bit, because he's not a central character, or he's in the Mournival, but he's not like the central character. So he's a little bit whinier and on the outside than you would otherwise expect. So it puts people off him. However, by the time you get to the Heresy, but so the Siege, he's pretty much a background character until you get to the Siege. And in the Siege, he becomes much more interesting, and that's where you get the big Abaddon development. Then you have the Night Lord series, where because Talos rejects him, everyone's a Night Lords fan. Loads of people reject him too, so that's a problem. And the other is the Black Crusades and the idea that he failed 12 times, and it's like, well, that's just a misunderstanding of what he was actually attempting to accomplish. So yeah, that's kind of why everyone hates him, but he is a really interesting character. Like Abaddon is a born king. That's what he should have been, but he rejects all of that, and he is an incredibly strong Astarte. Like there are some ridiculous quotes around Abaddon, which we go through in the stream, where even Sanguinius calls him a model of warriorship. Imagine the Sanguinius saying that about you. What a ridiculous statement. And he's regularly described as not the best fighter in the Imperium, but he also always wins against these ridiculous opponents. He kills Endred Ha, he kills Jubal Khan, he just Loken, he just constantly wins, man. Like he's just he's a monster. So I like him.
I will say one of the downsides of Abaddon being an incredibly big character in the setting, and B, him being written by so many people, is that he's one of them, in my opinion, and I'd be interested to get your opinion on this too. I think he's one of the most inconsistently written characters in Heresy or 40k. He's incredibly underwritten at the beginning of the Heresy. He just seems like it's very weird, because even when the Heresy was first written, you do know that he becomes the despoiler at the end.
Sure, yeah.
But he's just kind of this gruff, overbearing character, and he's almost sort of portrayed as a bit of a jock, dumb, gruff, aggressive archetype, which is totally incongruous to how he's written in the Black Legion books. So what were you going to say?
No, yes, I was going to say, I remember as well, I've listened to the audio book version of it. He's quite whiny in the first, but the way he's voiced. But yes, no, you make a very good point, mate, because yes, if we think about how he was written, we have him in the early 40k days, where he's written as someone who seeks to be the successor of Horus, and then when ADB writes him, that book leans heavily into the idea of, could Abaddon be a son or a clone of Horus? It literally hypothesizes that. And then you get to the Horus Heresy, and the Horus Heresy is kind of a background book, and that's kind of wine, and he takes out Alokan, and you're like, oh fuck, I hate this guy. And then, but it's only by the time you get to the Siege, they're like, oh, actually, we're going to do away with this old law now. We've got this idea for him to be this born king who rejects that idea and then seizes the mantle for himself, and you're like, oh, that's epic. That's really good. He should have just done that from the start. But yes, Warhammer, it's the downside of Warhammer evolving. But the truth is, not many people do read the Siege, so they don't get Abaddon's lore. It's just not very. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to. So you don't have to read the Siege, and so yeah, it's just always going to be dominated by whatever YouTube says he sucks.
Yeah, I mean, his interactions with Perturabo, especially in Saturnine, are fascinating. And adds so much to his character. Although, on a slight tangent, I will say one of my favorite things ever that Abaddon does is, when was the last time you played Skyrim?
Oh, probably last year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know about you, but one of the things that I do when I'm a bit bored in Skyrim is I start messing around with alchemy, and
that's it. First on alchemy.
No way, really?
I'm straight into it, mate. Yeah, I want the best. The best war gear possible. I want, yeah. yeah.
But in the Black Legion novels, essentially what you discover is that Abaddon's been going around for about 1,000 years by himself, adventuring. He's using the Vengeful Spirit as his home base, and it's just full of crap, like you would have if you were using it as an adventurer home in Skyrim. To the point where there's a bit where he's messing around trying to create the warp, essentially, in a flask. Yeah. And it's oh my god, it's he's just finished the game and he's just messing around with the alchemy skill tree now.
I get what you get. Yeah. Yes. No, for sure. Like he supposedly, and we don't see it, but like the Black Legion series posits so many things that, like, if they're true, are so big for Abaddon. So like we know that he has formed all these deals with the Drukhari. We don't know the details of that, and that's why he can like create these incredibly powerful beings like Dravur and Morkath. And we know that he then will siege Commorrah at some point, purely because Iskander Kaon asks him to, and he's like, "Sure, bro, I got your back." And you're like, "Okay," and then he's going to go and break Magnus the Red, and you're like, "Okay, this is a lot like for a space marine." So it's a lot of it is just sort of like left out there, and they're let to go into yet to go into. But yes, no, you make a good point. You make a really good point about how his lore has been changed, and different writers, etc., over time, and yeah, I think that people love Archaon as well, so people want him to be Archaon, and the point of Abaddon is that he's not Archaon, like, oh, he's not Horus, you know. You are and always were an evil legion. You took the Emperor's mission and twisted it. Selfish, monstrous tormentors of the weak, snarled Raudoran. Nice. If Horus had not turned, I would have gladly led the hunt for your kind myself. I thank you from my heart, and that you came to my sword and saved me the trouble of looking, said Raudoran. Nice. That's a hard quote. Can you explain to me Curze's issues with having the scum of Nostramo as recruits? Current day Imperium employs all kinds of scum of the galaxy, and they are fine on the battlefield. I guess it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is that he genuinely does have a strong sense of his justice. His justice is just very strict. So, like, you know, committing suicide is technically a crime, and so he will kill somebody who attempts to commit suicide, as Chris pointed out earlier.
It's not even just that.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I was going to say it's not even just that. It's the fact that you have to understand that the Great Crusade is just a different time. The point of it is that it is a time of hope and expansion, and, you know, a new dawn for humanity. So it's humanity kind of isn't struggling in the same way in 30k that it is in 40k.
Sure.
So like horrible things are still happening. Like they still have slavery and you know, cybernetics and all this kind of like horrible stuff. But the idea is that, you know, it's a more hopeful time and they're sort of guiding themselves towards progress and enlightenment. It's not like safety and ignorance and despair that you have in the Imperium in the 41st millennium. So yeah, it's a different context. So the point of the legions is that they are, you know, shining examples as much as anything else. And Curze originally wants that. He wants his legion to be, you know, an example for other people to follow, or at least to be the best, or like to have the best, like the best morals, if not anything else.
There's a really interesting bit as well. Sorry, just a bit of a tangent for what you're talking about there, where there's a really nice bit in Curze's Primarch novel where, there we go. Curze is very jealous and he hates only Corvus Corax. Like, in terms of his brothers, he only actually hates Corvus because, and it's basically that Bane thing, because Conrad Curze is a master of the night and, like, you know, can stalk through the shadows and everything, but Corvus Corax can practically turn invisible outside of like automatic scanners. So like Conrad Curze is just outright jealous of that, and in a way it's a sign of maturity that he can admit that to himself, that he genuinely just hates Corvus. But I guess there's a parallel there in terms of Corvus, and I don't know how he really rationalizes it, but he does still kind of see himself as that freedom fighter, which of course the Night Lords are not. I think the Night Lords should ally with the Flayed Ones, skins of technology, a match made in heaven. I mean, if you want to give me a Twice Dead King Night Lords team up, oh, that would go hard.
Wow.
It's only making my way through the Gaunt's Ghost series. So far, it's really good. Remember, Gaunt's Ghost, was that your first series, mate? Was it?
Yeah, Ghostmaker was actually the first novel I ever read. And it's a good one to start on, although I will say I was 10 at the time and didn't really understand what I was reading.
It's one of those things, again, to your point earlier, where like the 40k kind of evolved over time, and like that first book, I think that's the only one I've really done a review for on the channel, where you get kind of like proper like Men of Iron lore. Which like nowadays,
Uh,
Games Workshop would never do that properly. It's like little like Blackstone Fortress, little tidbits or something. But like it's kind of pretty heavy to get like Men of Iron Lord book 1. Like that's nuts.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan Abnett back in the Ghostmaker days, he was inventing the lexicon that we use today, like Prometheum as petrol. He invented that in those books.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. RJS. So Septimus and Octavia. So Septimus 7 and Octavia 8 are the apparent parents of Talos's heir Decimus 10. But this name scheme implies that there was a Nonanius 9 we never met. Do you think that's a story to come? Good question. Sorry. Yes. So what he's referring to there is Septimus is called Septimus because he is the 7th slave of to hold the position for Talos, and Decimus of course is 10, so like rounds out. But there is a number 9. He just dies in the series. So yes, good question, but fortunately, yes, AGB has already got that covered. The weirdest Abaddon appearance I ever witnessed was him in Dawn of War 2 Retribution, being invested in the Bloodraven plot. Yes, does he appear in Dawn of War 2? I do not remember that.
I don't remember that either.
Yeah.
To be fair, it's been a while.
I would have thought, yeah, interesting. Okay. I have to see if I can find some footage of that, because I'll be honest, I can't be asked to play it all through to find that one scene, but that is quite interesting.
I was just realized as well, talking about Decimus, there is something brought up in these novels that I don't think ever really appears anywhere else in any of the novels, and it's to do with Talos' gene seed. Like, there's so many allusions that a lot of people make to Talos, and they say, your gene seed's going to be really powerful one day. And that's not something that ever really gets commented on ever again in any novel, because the Space Marines reproduce themselves through the gene seed. They don't have sex and don't have relationships like that, and so the idea of a Space Marine passing down his makeup and genes and whatever through his own gene seed to the next generation of Marines, that just doesn't come up ever again.
I get where you're coming from. You are definitely right. Sorry, this is one example that's coming to my mind immediately. But you are definitely right in the sense that it doesn't come up nearly as much as you might suspect. Because, like, for example, in Space King, they lean heavily on that idea.
Yeah.
And that is why I suspect that Flash Kids read the Night Lords trilogy, because it's a big thing in the Night Lords trilogy. The only example I could think of that's very prominent is the Exorcist book, which is very good. I would definitely recommend reading this, where we find out that when it's confirmed that the Exorcists are Imperial Fist successors, it's not just like implied or rumored. We know it because they're what's his name? Oh, I have to search for it later. I can't remember the name. Anyway, the main character of the book, he is of Imperial Fists. He's got an Imperial Fist gene seed. So so he is literally the successor of this legendary Imperial Fist character who fought and killed this demon once before, and so that's why this demon is obsessed with him, because he is an Imperial Fist, and so he kind of does wield that might in that respect. But certainly, I guess to what you're talking about, the whole prophecy, because like they say to Talos, like, your gene seed will birth someone incredibly powerful or something like that, don't they? That is more, I guess, of the in the kin of the foresight of the Night Lords. But yes, it doesn't come up as you're right, it doesn't come up as much as you might suspect, and it probably should do, given that there are so many legendary characters that people would like to see return, and or if they've just died, like how to see them come up once again. It would be good. They should do it more. But yeah, The Exorcist is the only time I can think of where it's pretty prominent. But yes, it's a good spot. Oh, sorry, I've disappeared you.
Oh.
If justice presupposes personal responsibility, it's always confused me how Curze can believe that everyone is a slave to fate. Yes, I mean, I think that's kind of a good question. With all the Primarchs, there's always going to be those bits of hypocrisy. We mentioned Corvus Corax, of course, believing he is a freedom fighter whilst being pretty fully in on the Imperium of Man. And yes, Conrad Curze's pursuit of fate and justice doesn't seem to make sense with his own history of where fates have changed, etc. So yeah, even when he fights the lion, for example, he becomes genuinely scared that he's going to die, and so it's like, oh, okay, you clearly don't believe the shit you say because you're actually worried you're going to get chopped up any second now.
Well, it just goes back to this idea that I don't think the Primarchs are built to ever be self-reflective enough to understand that they could ever be wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
the Corax.
Gilliman and the Lion, they're doing an okay job, I think, now of doing that kind of avenue of Gilliman has reflected a lot on breaking up the 500 worlds and restricting the legion, breaking up the legions into chapters, and he's pretty much accepted that he was wrong. And of course, the Lion is a he's like, maybe I didn't handle the whole. Maybe I didn't handle things great. we all made mistakes.
But that's the thing. They always do it looking back. In the moment, they pick a decision and they just go for it. There's no self-reflection. They're just like, yep, okay, that's what we're going to do. Great example of that is the Corax Primarch novel. He picks a direction to go in, and it's one of the only examples of a Primarch failing at something, because he doesn't do well in that campaign, and it's because of the decisions he makes, and never someone even tries to call him out. It's like, nope, you're wrong, screw you. Okay.
Yes, Marek was the Night Slave. Yes, thank you so much. Yes, Lexicana mistakes are funny enough, but it gets even better when 40k lore YouTubers parrot those same mistakes verbum pro verbo. Well, the point I made, the thing I say in the video, sorry, I should explain for people who are interested. The reason the Sanguinor mistake is so interesting to me is because the book that explains the identity of the Sanguinor is not a book. It is about 5 fucking pages. I'm just like, the Sanguinor is quite an important part of 40k. I'm not a Blood Angels guy, but I would read the lore on the Sanguinor because he's the fucking Sanguinor. And these are people who are like, I just love Warhammer. I just love 40k so much. I'm like, but you can't read the 5 pages. I mean, like, if somebody says they're a massive fan of 40k, but they won't read the end and the death, I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess technically it's a lot of reading and maybe you're just not interested. Maybe, but how can you make a video on the Sanguinor and not read the fucking 5 pages you have to read to know who he is? That's madness to me. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. Is yeah, I'm like I say, I'm trying to be careful and I'm trying to be generous and do the thing, because I stream live, right? I do this lore live, so I have to give some breadth. It's not like people will say the wrong word at some point, but like if you invent your own Warhammer lore, like if I just invented the story today of Talos fighting against Typhus and invent the whole story there, like then you'd be pretty fucking confused. The Talos Unity thing is because Talos couldn't handle his gifted powers due to his body compatibility. Decimus probably was more compatible and could hold the Night Haunter's gift fine. I guess that could work in terms of his mother being like a powerful psyker. I could see that. Eliphas, a wordbearer from the Dark Crusade, joined the Black Legion and is sent by Abaddon to the Aurelia sector to set things straight in Dawn of War 2 Retribution. I don't really like the idea of Gene Seed when they have the ability to make clones. Why not just make clones of Space Marines? It would be faster, other than genetically modifying children.
I mean,
I guess. I guess it's... yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, to be fair, there are echoes of that, maybe a little bit, in the latest Alpha Legion novels. There's one warband where they all have identical faces, and it's not really alluded to as to whether they're all clones or if they have done that surgically. So I guess it's possible. I think
it probably doesn't work because like for example in Ashes of the Imperium, that's probably the best example I can think of. When they need to start cracking out Space Marines quickly, they don't resort to cloning. So I guess it's sort of the limitations of cloning. Maybe there's a bit of a tradition aspect to it, like for example, yeah, like the Space Marines are like the genetic lineage of their gene fathers, but I guess Abaddon should in theory have no problem cloning Space Marines. I would guess it's probably just not worth their time. And it's too resource intensive, but yeah, maybe in theory that's possible. But I guess 40k, how technology works in 40k, like a lot of it practically would come down to resource management, right? Like it's the age-old question: why don't they just keep making legions of custodians? It's like because I think each one takes like half a world's resources or something absurd, right? No, it's just resource management. You got to go about it. Nightshade Union, re-returning characters. Oh, sorry, RE returning characters. Did Samus's creation destroy Loken's soul? Do you think there's a possibility he could return as a Legion of the Damned Marine or something? In terms of Samus's creation destroying Loken's soul, no, I don't believe that's true at all. The reason I would say that is because in the Iron Hands trilogy, we know that the soul of Ferrus Manus' death also birthed a demon. And so, and we also know that Ferrus Manus' soul endures after that point because Sanguinius speaks to it. So we can be pretty confident that Loken's death didn't destroy his soul. As to whether he could return, I'm sorry to say, but I think his death is so, beginning of the heresy, end of the heresy. I don't think they would bring him back. I think there's a good chance you'll see Samus. I think that will happen. But Loken, I don't see returning. In theory, possible. I can't see why it's not possible. Certainly, Garrow, probably more likely to see, actually, because when he dies, he's sort of properly being saved by the Emperor's light and and ascend. So I think there's a decent chance you see Garrow again, but at least in like a vision or something to torment Mortarion. In fact, I wonder, that would be an interesting piece of lore, is because how in Dark Imperium, Mortarion, there's this bit where Mortarion's just like on his ship and he's tormenting he's got his dad in a jar. He's captured his original dad, Barbarous, and he just torments him and he literally spent I can't remember how long it was, but he spent a long time hunting down his soul and captured it. In theory, he fucking hates Garrow now, so maybe he tried to do the same. S6. I'm a bigger fan of 40k than you, Sandman. I haven't read a 40k book. I just have a massive waistline. So which book to start reading? The Night Lords. So I would probably recommend reading Conrad Curze's Primarch novel. I wouldn't say you have to have read The Heresy to read that, and then that would lead you directly into the Night Lord series, which is really nice. And that's basically why that book was written, I think, in part of the reason it was written. As for if you want to go right back to The Heresy, then if you're just a big Night Lords guy, I'd always recommend reading the first 5, and then I would just skip to Vulcan Lives. And then, then you're into the Unremembered Empire stuff. The weird thing about the Night Lords and the Heresy is that, you'll see if you go on Warhammer Community or whatever, they talk a lot about the Thramas Crusade. The Thramas Crusade is not much in the Heresy. It's in Age of Darkness.
One of the Black Books.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say that Age of Darkness has the Causeway Lion Curze fight.
Oh, yeah.
But most of it is, yes, you're exactly right, it's in the Black Books. It's book 9, Crusade. In fact, that lore is online for free now, I'm pretty certain. So if you go onto the Warhammer Community website, then you can find 3 pages of the Black Books, and that is one of the ones that's free now. So definitely check that out. But yes, if you're going 40k, then I would go Conrad Curze, the Night Lord, Night Haunter, and then the Night Lord trilogy, and then you could do Remnant, do Lords of the Night, and then do Remnant Blades and Morven Var as well. It's pretty good. They're all good. They're all genuinely good books. It's just Talos overshadows them all. I like to believe that the extreme decisiveness of many of the Primarchs is due to how they are engineered to be generals. A wrong decision on the battlefield is bad, but indecision is worse. True. I get where you're coming from. Yeah. I see what you mean. The particular example you mentioned brushes me even more as I'm a Blood Angels fan. Rogue Dawn was notoriously stubborn and couldn't be told he was wrong or short-sighted without challenge, so that checks out. It could get freaky. Sorry.
I was going to say, to be fair though, Dawn's basically always right though.
I mean, in the heresy, he's usually right, isn't he?
In the heresy,
yeah, he's the one that plays a blinder. In the scouring, we will see, and I suspect we're going to see some questionable decisions from him. And in theory, that's what should happen. And I think it would be good. Like, I think that Imperial Fist fans will be like, I suspect Imperial Fist fans will read the scouring and go, "Why have they done this to Dawn?" But I think that's kind of the point. Is that like he, like you say, he pretty much is right throughout the heresy. Like everyone says how important he is. He's just so vital. He doesn't make any massive errors compared to the other Primarchs. He's outplayed by Alfarius, but then still wins. Like, it's just, yeah. I mean, Dawn kind of is nothing but net. So seeing him make some big errors in the scouring, it's good for his character.
The thing is, we have to see Dawn get to the point where he essentially sacrifices most of his legion in the Iron Cage just because he's angry. And like, that is the total opposite of calm, calculated, like, I'm fully in control Dawn of the Siege.
Yes, no, you're exactly right. Yeah. Just to explain, so if people are watching, that is the way the Iron Cage is pretty much written. It's written in like an index, so it's not like a novel style. So we don't see his exact thought process, but it very much implies exactly what Alex says, that he was like, I'm gonna dig Perturabo out of his hole, and then he just fucking gets fucked up, and then get him and saves him. But it wouldn't surprise me to see that get rewritten, because Games Workshop, it's one of Games Workshop's greatest weaknesses, is that they can't just write a Primarch making a mistake. Fulgrim gets tricked by the sword, and then he kind of works his way out. Mortarian's tricked by Typhus, but then in the siege, they're like, actually, Mortarian knew what was going on all the time. Horus is tricked by Erebus, but he sees through Erebus straight away. They can't just have a Primarch get tricked. They're like, no, they must have seen through it all along. But I think it would be better just to have Dawn make a genuine mistake in anger. Also, I think it works because Dawn has been tortured by Khorne for centuries, and like, yes, he's loyal and pushed past it, but maybe that had an impact on him, and he makes a massive error in a response. I think that works. I think it works well. So I'd be perfectly right with that, but I'm not an Imperial Fist fan. Although you are, actually. So there you go. I'm covered. I'll blame you. Boas, thank you so much for the super chats. If the Emperor raised all his sons on Terra like he wanted, what do you think he'd have favored more? Curze, the son who could see into the future, or Angron, the super empath paladin? Yeah, good questions. Great questions. I do love the theory that Angron was supposed to be so much more important than he was, and yeah, like there's so little lore on it. It's fleeting glimpses into how he's able to kind of restore calm to the other gladiators on New Syria. But it is there that he had this ability to be this incredible commander in general and leader of humanity that perhaps even none of the other Primarchs could have been, until the Butcher's Nails got stuck in.
I mean, if you look at the Primarchs and the way that they are sort of like personified, I've heard a few people say that each of the Primarchs is almost like a different emotional aspect of the Emperor, sort of like taken form. And so it kind of leads you to think like, oh, which one is Angron then? Because like, he's not.
I'm hesitant that because Diocletian addresses that specifically in Carrying Order of the Imperium. I hate to weaponize a custodian against you, Alex, but he does say that's not true.
Maybe true, but also shut up.
Yeah. But I think they wanted to put that in because they didn't. It pigeonholes them too much to do like, this is a specific aspect of the Emperor, and
true.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely bits of it that are almost certainly true. Like you're definitely right to some degree, but I think it's specifically the idea that each one of them is like the Emperor split up. That's what he basically addresses. So yes, in terms of which one would be he'd have favored more, it's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, and Angron as a leader of humanity would have been quite something. If you actually had an empathetic Primarch, that could have been quite something.
not even just that. This is something that happens, or is alluded to a lot in Angron's Primarch novel, um, because obviously the legions took on certain characteristics from their Primarch's original personality, as it was supposed to have been, through the gene seed. And so, one thing that Angron's Primarch novel goes on and on about is the idea of brotherhood. So, always in my mind, I always had the assumption that Angron was the Primarch that was supposed to keep the other Primarchs together. He's like, he's the big brother. He's the one that's like the peacemaker between the different brothers. He's the one that has the strongest sense of like brotherly love and camaraderie. And you see that with, the way that he's so torn up when he's rescued from New Syria, because he's lost his found family. He's lost his brothers, and he struggles to accept his new family. So if he had been brought up, with the other Primarchs, didn't have the nails in his head, I think he would have been a stabilizing force within the rest of the Primarchs. I think that was his function.
Yes, but yes, there's so little to go on, but I do like the idea that you're onto something there, because the other thing I'm thinking of is that in the early Great Crusade, the Bloody 12th, they still gained the name the Bloody 12th, but like the Emperor held them back. And although they were the Bloody 12th, there is this idea that the legions without their Primarchs fall into something that is much worse than they should have been. Most famously, the Blood Angels. So I like the idea that perhaps the Emperor had an affinity for the 12th Legion, and he kind of knew that he put something special into the 12th Primarch, and therefore he was really hoping that Angron would be this incredible leader of men. And so that just didn't happen. And we do see this camaraderie in the 12th Legion outside of outside of them being reunified with Angron. The other thing that comes to mind is like in a similar vein to your question there, Boas, is that when in the Lion's Law, it says that the lion was created first for a reason, and that reason was, broadly speaking, the Mechanicum. So the Emperor kind of knew how big of a problem the Mechanicum could pose in theory, and so he needed to create the Dark Angels. That's why they were created first, is to make sure that he created this legion that could act as his extermination force and deal with the Mechanicum as and when they would pose a threat to the Imperium of Man. However, after the line is made, he would have made the second Primarch. So what was the second Primarch? And between the second and 11th, there's something there. Do you know what I mean? Like perhaps the second had a specific. He was made after making sure Mars couldn't be a problem. What did the Emperor think of next? And that's why he designed the second Primarch. And then you get to Fulgrim, and Fulgrim is like a perfect boy. He's a perfect little boy. So then he just gets the rest of the stuff, which makes me think that the second, like the first, could have had this really specific niche but important role that the Emperor might have needed. So I wonder if there is something there, if assuming this is them all being raised on Terra. But yes, I like. It's fun to hypothesize about loyalist Angron. Loyalist Curze is just so hard to imagine because he's also just mad because of who he is. Do you know what I mean? He's also mad because he is just this kind of tortured by future visions. So.
Yeah, he goes increasingly madder as the storyline goes on, and it's not a fun. Actually, this is something I think a lot of people fail to realize. Him going mad isn't a consequence of him falling to chaos. It's a consequence of him being kind of a bit wrong in the head anyway. So it's not his fault. Well, okay, I'm not gonna say it's not his fault, but actually no, it isn't his fault. Sure, and he doesn't actually fall to chaos. He just goes mad.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I would say as well, probably worth mentioning, is that the effigy does say if Conrad Curze had met the Emperor one more time, then he would have been healed. The Emperor could have healed Conrad Curze. And there's a great irony to that, because that means that Sanguinius ejecting Conrad Curze into space denied a loyalist Primarch, essentially, at Terra. Which is again another in terms of the what ifs people run in terms of what if they've been raised on Terra. I love that what if? Like, what if just
Hmm.
that was your only change to 40k? It's just the Sanguinius takes Curze back to Terra, then you have a loyalist Curze, and then Curze, presumably is not going to be okay. They're not just going to be like carry on as normal son. Like, they're going to want to use him for some sort of clandestine activities. He's going to be trying to, can he command the Night Lords? At that point they do sort of revere him as a god, and like, yeah, could
I
he
mean,
turn the Night Lords? Like, would he take on the
let's
Nightfall?
game
Yeah.
let's game that out. Because like imagine, okay, if we imagine loyalist Curze, there's two things. Like you said, he could essentially just say to the Night Lords, okay, we're loyal now, come join, or just like wreak havoc wherever you are. Or alternatively, he just goes and tries and assassinates the other Primarchs, like all
Yeah.
the traitors. Like there could be a subplot where Curze assassinates Perturabo, and the entire siege falls apart immediately as a result, because that's kind of what
Yeah.
would happen.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, it's yeah, that would be a fun what if. Because I think
Yeah.
I've never read them, so I don't want to put them down. But I think something that sort of I always kind of go, ooh, not so sure about that. Is when it comes to the what if heresies, I always
Mm,
find that they go like, oh yeah, we'll switch everybody. We'll switch
mm,
every loyalist, every traitor. I'm like, oh, I prefer the idea that you just make like one significant change, like you make Angron land on New Syria, and then you try and come up with how that would change everything thereafter. I think that is a
mm.
cooler way of doing it than just switching. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I mean, there's a fascinating one with what was it with Korax? There's a what if scenario. What if a legion turned to chaos, but their Primarch stayed loyal?
Mm, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
so that happens with the what if scenario with the Raven Guard. The Raven Guard side with Horus, and
yeah.
Korax stays loyal, and he has to assassinate as many Raven Guard as he can before he like bugs off back to Terra.
Well, that is potentially one of the explanations of the second and 11th, or both, where
Mm.
Rogor Dawn's conversation with Malkador basically says that the second and 11th legions were absorbed by the Fists and the Ultramarines, which is why they're so big, and therefore presumably they were loyal, but their Primarch wasn't. Like, there's
Mm.
there's something going on there. I haven't read the Fabius books, but how do the homunculi of the Dark Eldar do it? It has to do something with the soul. For true cloning, you have to dip into the warp and recreate the soul. So they have a machine that literally grabs the soul. As long as you have like a drop of blood, they can. If a Drukhari dies, a wealthy Drukhari, they can literally grab the soul before it is absorbed by Slanesh and pull it back and put it into a new body. And we don't really understand this technology, of course, but yes, in theory, the richest of the Drukhari and the homunculi, they are truly immortal, because they can just Carrion Lord of the Imperium has probably the most famous example of this, where they just live forever. It doesn't matter how many times you're killed, as long as they have a single drop of blood, they can just make a new body, grab the soul, put it into a new one, and just carry on as all good. But yeah, like there's also stuff like the Harlequins resurrect as Drubial Vect. That's another one. So yeah, they have their own ways of doing stuff. This is probably also why they didn't fix the Golden Throne or the Emperor's samples. It's even beyond their craft. Yes. Fabius Bile definitely should have his own legion of cloned Space Marines other than his new men. I'm listening to his books, but I haven't finished them yet. Well, I won't explain spoil them, but yeah, you basically find out why. So he very much comes to the conclusion that he doesn't want his own Space Marines, and his new men are more than fit for purpose. You should read Gene Father, which follows up on that plotline.
That's a great book.
I feel like Angron always turns because of how horrifically big he treats his people, and the best case for the Imperium is nailed Angron. Interesting. Maybe you could write that. I could see. I think Sanguinius and Curze would be the most favored by the Emperor. Hope and terror, righteousness and justice. I think those two would be moral, impartial pillars. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Sanguinius, they lean quite heavily into the Jesus stuff with Sanguinius, so it's kind of hard not to like.
I'd actually disagree with that entirely. I
Oh,
would say
okay.
the Emperor. Yeah, I'd say the most favored son of the Emperor would be Magnus.
Uh, I
Because
get
he
it's a
all
big thing they've got in common, but I'm most favored.
Yeah, because like all the super special plans the Emperor
Hmm.
has all revolve around Magnus. He's the one that's supposed to be on the Golden Throne, which is the center of the Emperor's plans. He's the one that has the psychic communication with him before they
Hmm.
even meet. He's the one who, like, okay, we don't know if this is true or not, like, gets given the second chance. So,
Let's
like,
give it a second chance. That is yes. Wrath of Magnus, Fury of Magnus, something of
yeah.
Magnus. I always mix them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the second chance does seem legit. I don't see people, I don't see people arguing against that. But
Well,
no,
no, because there's the
I
bit
get where you're
where,
coming from. It's a perfectly
yeah,
fine argument. I guess it's just the Edict of Nicaea is so like it's so brazen, and it's like the Emperor is quite harsh, and like you just have a chat with the guy, man. The whole thing is a bit weird. So because also you have
true.
oh, it's fleeting. It's gone. Never mind.
Which,
But yes, I mean, there's always going to be Primarchs that he had that kind of special bond with. Yeah, it's kind of hard to argue against too much. But Magnus is a yeah, that's fair enough. I guess they just also, I guess it's just like his purpose. You know, they also talk, oh yeah, Alfarius is the one I was going to think of. Like, assuming
yeah,
you trust that, you could sort of lean into that idea that he knew the Emperor the best, and they were particularly close. Perhaps not impossible.
true. I mean, arguably, you could put Korax up there as well, because he does seem to have this like very close affinity with Korax from even their like fleeting interactions.
Yeah, yeah. Loyalist Curze is not hard enough to think about. What the hell are you on, Sandman? Okay. Conrad is locked out of the moral conundrum. He has no way out. If you give him a way out, aka you can be a monster and just at the same time, and that they are not mutually exclusive, he'd be fine. That is the source of his madness. I guess I get where you're coming from, but he also like is tortured. But the other reason he's mad is because he foresees his death, and because his death is always like a possibility if he goes mad. Doesn't that also make him mad? Also, the Dark King. There's a reason Conrad Kurz went by the name the Dark King, and Malkador is a reflection of the truth or something like that, by which he's talking about the actual Dark King. So I think part of Conrad Kurz's madness might genuinely be because maybe he didn't know what he was seeing. What if he foresaw a future where the Dark King rose, and that tormented him into madness? And he didn't really understand it, but he took from that the name the Dark King, and that's why he chose it. Like Dan Abnett chose the name the Dark King, I think quite specifically. I don't think it was just lazily done. So there's something there. Maybe not a coincidence that the lion wakes up around the same time the Mechanicum is plotting to betray the Imperium. Then yes, very. In the Dawnian heresy, they have Curze recognize that Dawn is going to fall to chaos, try to kill him, then later dies on the phalanx, which vindicates his whole approach. Interesting. Purty is scared to be assassinated. Also, the robots around him help. That's true. He has got the robots, but Curze can deal with robots. That's fine. He can take them on.
Easily.
I don't understand why the Emperor didn't bring his wrath down on the his wrath down on the high riders of New Syria for what they did to his son. He just let them get away with butchering Angron's dome. Yeah, it is pretty crazy. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, that is of the many things. Like I can excuse many things the Emperor did, but that's a tough one. That's a tough one to excuse. Any recent
It
word on our?
does.
Sorry.
Like I say, he does just pick up Angron and then leaves and
Yeah.
doesn't conquer New Syria at all.
Any recent word on Abnett's Pandemonium? Feel like it's set to drop huge revelations, tying Betgwin into the Scouring Arc and beyond. One of those lore pivots we're still waiting on. King Yellow. Nah, nothing since Abnett said it was basically done. He's just sort of it's Games Workshop waiting for the right time to release it. I think again, it backs up your point that it is going to be massive for the setting, because why else wouldn't they release it? A Dan Abnett book is always going to be huge. He's got 2 other books coming in the meantime, this Hive series, which I think everyone's pretty excited for, because any kind of just like the Vaults of Terror series, carrying any book that takes place like kind of a ground view of what it's like to be in the Imperium. It's always a big deal.
I mean, I have a sneaky conspiracy theory about all this, actually.
Yeah.
So I have a sneaky suspicion that whatever happens with Pandemonium, that's it, the third Beckwin book, is going to be so earth-shattering that it's going to really affect the tabletop game as well. And I think whatever is going to happen is going to coincide with a full relaunch of the Custodes range and Valdor coming out as a plastic model in 40k. Bear in mind, I have absolutely no idea about any of this. No one tells me anything. This is just me thinking ahead. But yeah.
Yes, I get where you're coming from. I do think it will be huge. And I do think it will end with a returned Valdor. My personal theory, which someone mentioned earlier, is that I think that what Valdor has been doing, like he's doing a lot. But the main thing he's been doing, in fact, I think the stream this Wednesday is I'm talking to my editor Ben about King in Yellow, so stay tuned for that, guys. But I think that Valdor is the reason he's been doing all these experiments, putting grails into these blanks, is because the idea of putting a luminous warp being into a vessel is basically what the Starchild is. Starchild is a luminous warp entity, putting it into a vessel. So I think that Beta Beckwin is going to be revealed to be like powerful enough, strong enough to be a vessel for the Starchild, and that's the way it ends. Yeah. My only thought about when it happens is because the timeline isn't a problem because it's in the City of Dust, so shenanigans. But because he's got this massive army, to be fair, at the end of the second book, Valdor is under attack. Like she sees in the distance all of this battle going on, and we don't know who it is. We know Craft Worlders are after him, and we know all these traitor legions are after him, but we don't know exactly how. But like, if he's got this massive army of Blood Angels, the thing that makes like logical sense is that he expends those forces in saving Terra or in doing something grand. And so perhaps, I'd find it a bit lame if Valdor has spent 10,000 years building up his army and then a bunch of traitor legions come up and crush them. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. But yes, that's where I think it's going to go. So I think that it will establish the Starchild. The other spanner is because of the Dawn of Fire series. So the Dawn of Fire series has this heavy lore on the Starchild. For such a random ass series, it does that well. And then that obviously got cancelled, basically drawn to a close early. And a lot of those plot lines are just left open. And so yeah, it's a real shit one, because like Nick Kime, he was onto something. He was writing some pretty good lore. He's just not good at actually writing. He's good at directing other people what to write. He's just not a good writer himself. But like, yeah, he was actually onto something there. He really was, and now they've sort of pushed that to the side.
I agree, and I do agree. I had the same thought about Beta Beckwin being like the reincarnated emperor.
But yeah. I mean, I think
that's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, she's Beta. She's not going to be. She's never going to be Beckwin, is she? No. And that's realistically where we want to go. And I think Hyperion is notably absent from like any modern Grey Knights lore since Emperor's Gift. So hopefully something big happens there. All right, I'll answer a couple more questions and we'll head off. One, the Blood Angels give an extra aggression in their coding. I think Noble Sangi might be a fluke. I mean, the Red Thirst, I assume is what you're talking about. Nike ended that way because of primarch politics. You couldn't be seen to play favorites this publicly and alienate others in this way. I mean, I think that's just. I don't really buy that, man. I mean, I'm not saying the reasoning is necessarily wrong. It's just, can you really buy that the Emperor couldn't justify bringing the people who tortured his son to justice? I don't really buy that. How did Curze see past his own death, but Sanguinius couldn't? Sanguinius could see past his own death. So Sanguinius could see, for example, the Tyranids coming. And he has the prophecy of the Golden Warrior. So he has a whole bunch of prophecies that are analysed by the Blood Angels. And that's kind of a big thing in Dante's series. He doesn't necessarily know what he's seeing all the time. Like, he doesn't know it's the Tyranids. It's just like a hunger. that's typically how the Tyrants are described: a hunger. Then Conrad became mad through the whispers of chaos, which is the vein, which is in the vein of Quicker went against. Okay. I was thinking about an official. I was thinking about an official 40k timeline. I was wondering if there was one. Would we end up having to over-explain how warp travel works, e.g. you arrive earlier than you left? I have no idea. In theory, yes. It doesn't happen as often as you might suspect. The idea of like you arrive earlier than you left, but in theory, totally. In terms of like an official 40k timeline, the best you've got is from the novel Silent King, which I went through in a stream last year, where they've basically put most of the key Indomitus books into a timeline. However, since it still fucks, because like since then we had Archmagos, they haven't explained where that falls, which is very important because we need to know where Gilliman is, or sorry, why Gilliman's on the other side of the Great Rift, or if it's just this devastation of Baal timeline. So yes, it's kind of, yeah, that's as good as you've got, really. They should do a much better job. Like I was saying the other day, Quipster, I don't know if you remember, on the Horus Heresy website, there used to be like this interactive map, not super interactive, but it had like a little timeline. They've taken that down. I just wish they did that for 40k. At least the thing is, because they don't release that many novels, I think they should just date novels. I think they should just date them from now on. Like for most of the time, it's not going to matter. It's random Inquisitor, random Sister of Battle story. 496. It's not going to make a difference. But like for the big stuff, it must help. And I think the thing that broke my heart is when someone messaged. I think they messaged Guy Haley when Genefather dropped or something like that, and said, "Oh, when does this fall?" And he said he doesn't know because they don't like tell them. And it's like the writers should know what they're writing for, and we want to know. Like for example, like that matters in the context of has Cool met Vashtor by this point, has Cool what's he heard, what's he ran into by this point, what could be his motivations and that kind of thing. And I know that they're very scared about writing themselves into holes as they have done in the past, but like I think doing a timeline is manageable.
To be fair, I think with what's happening with the Lion finally meeting Gilliman, that's going to happen, just so we understand where that meeting happens in the timeline. Like, it's kind of a pivotal point around which you have to write things.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, weirdly, with those books, the campaign books, they're a bit better on it. They normally, well, not too fair, not even, they often give a date when it's a campaign book, but yeah, they can be rubbish. And yeah, I think, like, for example, I think they spooked themselves, right? Sorry, before we finish up, because when they did Dark Imperium, I think they jumped ahead 100 years, and then they went, "Oh shit, that was too far." But that was their fault. That was an easy error that they should have avoided, and they didn't think it through. And I mean, hey, these things happen, right? But like now, just don't, as long as you don't do any like big century jumps, you'll be fine, man. Just yeah. But like, I think it would, like, for example, there are so many times I just imagine people getting into Warhammer and they're like, "Oh, the Aurora sector, what's that?" And then there's nowhere for them to really look, and like you can Google it, and you got like a Lexicanum article, like some crappy map. But if you showed like, "Oh, that's this sector," and then someone, "Oh, that's actually, so that's near the Tau Empire. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. That's cool." I think that is such a good thing to like pull people in. It's hard to envision it. I think people talked a lot about this with Age of Sigmar, with like the way that world is, with them reforging into a world, and the importance of this idea of you can envisage it. You can envisage a world. And like, I think that having just a one website on their page that's an interactive map of 40k with a timeline, just like they did for Heresy. With Heresy, it was great. And the Heresy time, like with Heresy, they sort of proves that they can do it fine, because the Heresy timeline was fucked for so many years, and so many of the numbers are still fucked. I mean, you mentioned the Iron Cage earlier, right? The Iron Cage lore officially is like 500 Imperial fists being sacrificed. 500 Imperial fists by modern Heresy lore is fucking nothing. So it's all of that's going to have to get changed. It's people roll with the punches, but an official canon website would work. Yeah. Anyway,
I agree.
Have you thought about doing a video revisiting any of your old predictions? Sometimes, yeah. I mean, it's always tempting to do the like I was right or whatever. And yeah, I guess Yeah, like my big one that I think is actually quite a good prediction is I think Jagatai Khan will be next. I'm still riding pretty hard for the Khan being next, just in terms of where the lore currently is. But like, yeah, my friend was saying the other day, just like I knew Perturabo would come back, and I was like, everybody knew Perturabo would come. Like that's not a prediction. That's just
Okay.
Yeah.
I bet you a tenner that the next loyalist to come back is Lehman Russ.
All right, I'll take that tenner. I reckon it's
Okay.
the Khan.
Okay.
Right, we'll do that. We'll do that right here, right now. Anyway, I think been to 40k for a few years now and didn't know the layout of 40k Galaxy till a few months ago. To be fair, mate, I have to remind myself all the time. But because the thing is, like 40k, sometimes in books you get a little map at the start, like kind of a fantasy sort of style, but not often. A lot of the time you don't. And like the idea of a timeline is super rare. And so, yeah, they should do better. Can't cope, and I need it and love it. Yeah, maybe it's cope. My vote goes for Corvus. Fair enough. I mean, hey, maybe we'll have to do a poll. You know, maybe I wonder if is it a poly market or whatever? You can like bet on anything. Maybe you can. Bet
oh my god, yeah. Should we do that?
yeah. Anyway, I think we're going to call it there, guys. I will trim this down later, but yes, hopefully, thank you so much for watching, everybody. That's the end of this. I hope that's a good introduction for Talos Valkorin and why we think he's such a good character. The series is so incredibly beloved. Definitely goes without saying to read this one for yourselves. But yes, we hope this was a useful introduction to the character. Quibster, thank you so much for joining me again, bud.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to come on.
Brilliant. All right. Okay. Chat, thank you so much for joining me. I will see you all next time, and I'll be back on Wednesday. So I hope you've had a good weekend, and have a good week. Take care. Thanks for watching this stream. If you could help me appease YouTube's machine spirit by liking and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. If you couldn't make the stream live but want to ask me a question anyway, consider posting it in our community tab and I'll answer it next time. To support the channel, click the join button below, which will give you access to more content, and you can drop into the members Discord where all the coolest Terrans hang out, away from the watchful eyes of the Inquisition. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, I wait for you and I forgive you. Good night.